Chapter 440. Junixia didn't even look at Bai Yuqiao as he plucked out the needles one by one from his shoulder. "Where's Master?" Bai Yuqiao circled in front of him and giggled. Beg me and I'll tell you." Junixia had been in a bad mood recently. Hearing these words, he immediately raised his hand to slap Bai Yuqiao. Bai Yuqiao understood his senior brother all too well and had long since hidden far away. "Master's waiting for you at the harbor," Junixia warned her with a fierce glare, then turned to look at the sea. He remained silent the entire way. That very night, the ship docked at the shore. As soon as he was on shore, he didn't seek out his master or tidy himself up. Instead, he contacted his subordinates and ordered them to do 3 things. The first was to announce that Northern Lee's Duke of Kong had successfully broken through the Bailey Navy's encirclement and left Fishery Island. The second was to send men to the City of Daughters and Carefree City to hire a large number of assassins to hunt down Gu. The third was to order a lockdown on all of Ouyang Ningnua's businesses in Northern Lee and cut off all dealings with the Tianning Merchant Guild. Since he, Junixia, had left Fishery Island alive, he wouldn't spare anyone who had humiliated and betrayed him. After finishing these 3 tasks, Junixia cleaned himself up before having Bai Yuqiao lead the way to see Bai Qingyan. On the way, Junixia finally spoke to Bai Yuqiao. "When did Master come back?" he asked in a low voice. "Just a few days ago. He suddenly showed up at the 100 Poisons sect. I had a fright too." Bai Yuqiao smiled. She had been guarding the 100 Poisons sect the entire time. She had to guard against the harassment from Medical City and think of a way to rescue Junixia at the same time. "Did he say anything?" Junixia asked. Bai Yuqiao shook his head. "It's not like you don't know his character. Anyway, he's just like you. He won't talk nonsense with me." Junixia rolled his eyes at her. Then, he asked his master how he could get him out of Yuzhou Island. As soon as Bai Yuqiao mentioned the poisonous fog, Junixia knew that his master's poison skills had improved. Having not seen each other for so many years, Junixia was a little timid when he arrived at the door. His father had passed away when he was 3 years old. In fact, in his heart, his master had always been his father. However, he had never understood why his master had left when he was 13. Junixia was still hesitating when a deep voice sounded from inside the room. "Is that Little Xie?" Little Xie was a hilariously childish name. Even the Northern Dynasty's emperors wouldn't call him that, but his master still called him that. A trace of sadness flashed past Junixia's arrogant eyes, but it quickly disappeared. He pushed open the door and strode inside. Inside, he saw a man in his 40s sitting by the tea table. Although he had a full beard, he didn't look old at all. Instead, he exuded the aura of a mature man. His deep, black eyes seemed calm, but hid a sharp, penetrating gaze. He was dressed in simple gray robes and sat there leisurely, but gave off an indescribable pressure. They were both of the same age, but Emperor Tianhui would probably be a cut below him if he stood before him. Junixia walked up to him and respectfully bowed with clasped hands. "Master, long time no see. Your disciple has missed you." Bai Qingyan personally helped him to his feet and said, "If Master had been a step late, wouldn't you have lost your little life?" The poisoner was a fellow called Gu. His origins are unclear. I've fought him before, but I didn't know his poison skills were so formidable. Junixia said seriously. That poison was indeed formidable. Most likely, that fellow's poison skills far exceed yours. As Bai Yanqing spoke, he gestured for Junixia to sit down. Ning Jing was as indifferent as a reclusive grandmaster over 100 years old. The poison on this disciple's shoulder. Before Junixia could finish, Bai Yanqing took out a blackened needle. "Even Master can't cure this poison. It looks like you should avoid offending that woman." "Master knows it's Han Yunqi too?" Junixia was puzzled. "I only heard about it after I left the mountains," Bai Qingyan replied. Junixia lowered his voice. "Master, the Shadow Clan members are risking their lives to protect her. Moreover, the poison sect's poison beast is in her hands." Bai Qingyan's eyes finally flickered. "What do you mean?" "This woman is very likely a descendant of Western Qin's imperial clan. This disciple has been investigating her background this entire time, but unfortunately, all the clues have been erased." Junixia continued, But Western Qin's imperial clan was clearly extinct back then. Perhaps this disciple is overthinking things. That shadow clan member is only after the poisoned beast. Western Qin's imperial clan. Imperial clan. Bai Qingyin muttered to himself. I didn't think someone from the shadow clan would still be alive today. Master, this disciple once tried to rope him in, but unfortunately, Junie Xie said regretfully. Did you expose your identity? Bai Qingyan grew anxious. Master, don't worry. Aside from the Northern Dynasty's emperors, no one else knows of our identities, Junie Xie replied seriously. It was because of his and his master's special status that the Northern Dynasty's emperors had indulged him and given him so much authority. He was from the Black Clan, one of the 7 noble families. Back then, it was his grandfather, the Black Clan's youngest general, who shot and killed the last descendant of Western Qin's imperial clan. It was the Black Clan that instigated the relationship between Western Qin's imperial clan and East Qin's imperial clan, causing the Great Qin's War. The Black Clan was the most ambitious of the 7 noble families. They instigated a civil war between the 2 imperial clans, but unfortunately, they were unable to clean up the mess. In the end, they suffered heavy losses and were forced to live in seclusion. As for his master, he was from the Wind Clan, one of the 7 noble families. The Wind Clan and the Black Clan had always been allies. His father and his master were as close as brothers. His father entrusted him to his master, hoping that they could work together to realize the Black Clan's unfinished business. His master entrusted him to the Northern Dynasty's emperors and used his status as a member of the 7 noble families to tempt the Northern Dynasty's emperors, promising to conquer the world for the Northern Dynasty's emperors. He simply wanted to use Northernly country as a stepping stone. Junie Xie originally thought that the Western Qin's imperial clan and East Qin's imperial clan had been exterminated, and the 7 noble families had mostly hidden themselves from the world. The world would eventually belong to his Black Clan. However, the appearance of the white-clothed prince from the Shadow Clan and Han Yunxi made him feel threatened. He had never used the Shadow Clan to cause trouble for Han Yunxi because he was worried. He had always wanted to find his master to discuss this matter, but unfortunately, he couldn't find him. Fortunately, his master had come. Bai Qingyin was silent. He tapped the table with one hand, thinking about something. Junie Xie looked at him, not daring to disturb him. After a long time, Bai Qingyin finally raised his eyes and murmured, You go back to Northernly first and investigate the situation at South Ning's horse farms. As for Han Yunxi and the Shadow Clan, let your master investigate first before we discuss further. Hearing this, Junie Xie was shocked. What happened to the Southern Horse Farm? At this time, Bai Yuqiao, who had been obediently waiting on the side, finally opened his mouth and told him about the plague at the Southern Horse Farm. The plague had already spread beyond the Southern Horse Farm and affected the surrounding ranches. The Northern Dynasty's emperors were about to go crazy. Junie Xie finally understood why the Northernly emperor hadn't sent troops to save him. It was because something so big had happened. The horse farm and the ranches were the lifelines of Northern Li. I'm afraid there's something fishy about this, right? Junie Xie asked suspiciously. No matter what you want to do, you have to take care of your stepping stone. Take Yuqiao with you. From now on, Yuqiao will follow you. You don't have to worry about the 100 Poisons sect, Bai Qingyin said seriously. Bai Yuqiao was overjoyed and quickly bowed. Thank you, master. This disciple understands. This disciple will immediately set out. Junie Xie's attitude was sincere without the slightest hint of pretense. He had always obeyed his master's orders 100% of the time. On the 3rd day after Junie Xie rushed to Northern Li's capital, news of his escape from Fishery Island had spread throughout the Tianing continent. Some people applauded, some stamped their feet, while others treated it as a show. Of course, there were still plenty of people waiting to see what would happen next. How could Tianing's Duke of Qin give up so easily? How could Northern Li's Duke of Kong not seek revenge? No one knew how Gu would react to the news, but Mu Ling only had one reaction when she heard the news. She turned towards the vast ocean and cursed, Junie Xie, why don't you just die? For the sake of finding Qi Big Brother, she had already made a trip to the 100 Poisons sect. After failing to find him, she decided to head out to sea for Fishery Island. No matter what Chi Big Brother was planning or scheming, he'd come looking for Junisia eventually. Who knew that Junisia would escape before she even reached Fishery Island? If Junisia escaped, then Chi Big Brother wouldn't come back. She was seasick. She'd spent a day on the sea, but now she'd wasted it. Now she had to turn back and chase after Junisia's whereabouts. By now, Long Fei Yi and Han Yunqi had already reached Fishery Island. Han Yunqi was currently examining the unconscious Marines and archers who'd been poisoned by the fog. There were quite a few unconscious Marines and archers, and they'd all been unconscious for different periods of time. Han Yunqi examined them in batches and made detailed notes. She didn't say a word during the entire process. The atmosphere was so solemn that even Bailey Yuchi didn't dare to speak. He glanced at His Highness Duke of Qin countless times, only to see him sitting on one side and admiring his esteemed Wang Fei as if she were a work of art. Bailey Yuchi thought that His Highness Duke of Qin would be in a better mood with esteemed Wang Fei around. Would he give him a lighter punishment later? However, reality proved that Bailey Yuchi was right. Qin Wang Fei was their savior. Your Highness, I underestimated the enemy. Even you wouldn't be able to endure this kind of poisonous fog for too long, Han Yunqi said bluntly. Bailey Yuchi was so shocked that he almost fell over. Fortunately, the Marines and archers had all retreated, so he was the only one present. Otherwise, His Highness Duke of Qin would lose all face. He'd thought that His Highness Duke of Qin would be displeased, but he'd only nodded and said nothing. Han Yunqi sat down and drank a cup of tea. Just as she was about to speak, Long Fei Yi gestured for Bailey Yuchi to withdraw. There really wasn't any punishment. Bailey Yuchi thought to himself that he had to properly support esteemed Wang Fei in the future. Only by following esteemed Wang Fei would he have a stable life. Once everyone had left, Han Yunqi finally spoke. Your Highness, although I can detoxify this poisonous fog, the poisoner's poison skills are far above mine and Junisia's. This concubine thinks that this person might be Junisia's master? Junisia had always been the leader of Cloud Realm Continent's poison world. She was an outsider. So many people had wondered where she'd gotten her poison skills from. Even Long Fei Yi had questioned her. But she'd always wondered where Junisia's poison skills had come from, and where Junisia's poison skills had come from. Poison goo came from the poison sect, which was taboo in Medical City. Could the person who taught Junisia be related to the poison sect? For the readers, Genius Little Poison Consort's official WeChat account, Tienkaksia du Fi. There are wonderful reviews waiting for you every day, so hurry up and subscribe. Chapter 441. Actually, it wasn't just Han Yunqi who suspected Junisia's poison skills. Long Fei Yi had been investigating the matter for a long time as well. Long Fei Yi wasn't just curious about Junisia's poison skills, but also about Junisia's background. Long Fei Yi had already investigated the 100 Poisons sect more than once. Unfortunately, the sect was so mysterious that he hadn't been able to find any useful information. Last time, Medical City had been causing trouble for the 100 Poisons sect because of Junisia's goo arts and the fact that he'd planted goo in Long Tianma. Unfortunately, Medical City hadn't been able to topple the 100 Poisons sect even after a year. The 100 Poisons sect was a hidden power that didn't rely too much on the secular world. Thus, they weren't restricted by Medical City much. On the other hand, Junisia's situation was rather tragic. If Junisia hadn't been exposed as a spy in Tianing last time, no one would know that he was the head of the 100 Poisons sect. His master must be the previous head of the 100 Poisons sect. Could this person be a member of the poison sect? Long Fei Yi asked doubtfully. Han Yunqi laughed. Your Highness, your imagination is a little wild. What do you mean? Long Fei Yi didn't understand. Han Yunqi's smile grew even more joyful. I mean that you're thinking too much. Long Fei Yi was expressionless. It looks like you're in a good mood. He was in a bad mood after Junisia had escaped, but this woman was still in the mood to joke around. Han Yunqi resentfully withdrew her smile. Your Highness, if it was someone from the poison sect who saved Junisia, why would Junisia waste so much effort to join forces with Duanmu Ya to search for the poison beast in the sky pit? At the very least, it has to be related to the poison sect. Long Fei Yi said mildly. The poison sect was the main sect of Cloud Realm Continent's poison world, and the 100 Poison sect was originally a branch of the poison sect. Han Yunqi agreed with this point. She sighed with emotion. If my father really is a remnant of the poison sect, then that's pretty good too. If her father was still alive and really was a remnant of the poison sect, he might be able to help Long Feiyi. Han Yunqi's heart was on Long Feiyi's side. She always wanted to help him. Long Feiyi rolled his eyes at her. Madame Tianxin wouldn't leave your father for no reason. I only hope that he is not a heartless man. Otherwise, I will definitely kill him for my mother. Patricide? In Long Feiyi's eyes, this woman was not a truly ruthless person. Han Yunqi felt awkward. I mean, if she wasn't the real Miss Han, so how could she kill her father? Fortunately, Long Feiyi didn't pursue the matter. They had already confirmed that Madame Tianxin was Mu Xian of Medicine City's Mu clan, but whether Mu Xian had an affair with a remnant of the poison sect was a rumor still needed to be verified. Han Yunqi silently mused that if they couldn't find anything soon, they would have to make a trip to the Mu clan sooner or later. The two of them walked out of the cabin as they chatted. Long Feiyi gazed out at the vast sea and asked in confusion, "How do you apply poison in such a wide area?" The person who applied the poison must be very familiar with the weather, especially the direction of the wind, the strength of the wind, and the moisture in the air. They must have a very precise grasp of the poison's toxicity to control it. Han Yunqi's lips curved in self-mockery as she spoke. I don't know the specifics, but I can't do it. The direction of the wind, the strength of the wind, Long Feiyi muttered to himself, as if recalling something. To be able to control such a large area of poison fog, the person must be very familiar with the direction of the wind and the strength of the wind. Otherwise, the fog would quickly disperse with a single gust of wind. Han Yunqi explained seriously, not noticing the complicated look in Long Feiyi's eyes. In that case, wouldn't it be very difficult to guard against this person's poison attack? Long Feiyi asked again. He needed to be more careful when it came to things he wasn't skilled in. That's not necessarily the case. To apply poison on such a large scale, one must pay attention to the right time and place. The person who set up the poison fog must have been guarding this area for a long time. If another poison fog were to appear, it would take a while more to guard this area. However, Junie Xie has such a helper, so we really can't be careless in the future, Han Yunqi explained. Not long after, the mermaid soldier who had been following Junie Xie returned. Your Highness, Junie Xie came ashore at Northern Li's harbor. The one who saved him was a yellow-robed girl. When he reached Northern Li, it was difficult for this subordinate to follow him. The mermaid soldier replied truthfully, "A girl?" Long Feiyi was very surprised. About 16 or 17 years old, the mermaid soldier replied. The person who applied the poison and the person who saved him should not be the same person, Han Yunqi said, then hesitated for a moment before saying, Your Highness, it's time to retreat. Junie Xie had already reached Northern Li, and the news had already been released. There was no use for them to stay here. Long Feiyi was very unwilling to give up. He couldn't wait to have the Bailey Navy attack Northern Li directly. However, now was not the time. That afternoon, Long Feiyi had Bailey Yuqi make preparations to retreat. Such a large navy had stayed here for more than 3 months, so there was still a lot of work to do. Using this time, Han Yunqi seized the time to prepare medicine. This group of soldiers and archers seemed to be unharmed, but there was still some poison left in their bodies. Although these toxins would not act up again, Han Yunqi still wanted to get rid of them. Long Feiyi's soldiers must all be strong, and no risk was allowed to exist. Fortunately, there was the detoxification system. Otherwise, Han Yunqi would be busy to death. She was busy for the entire afternoon and didn't see Long Feiyi for the entire afternoon. She didn't know where he went. However, when it was time for dinner, Long Feiyi appeared as usual and brought a plate of steamed lobsters. Han Yunqi was dumbfounded. Your Highness, you went to fish for lobsters? At this time, lobsters were in season in Yuzhou Island's illusory sea lake. However, it was not something that could be caught overnight, so basically no one was willing to come. The mermaid soldiers sent it. They sent a basket. It's just right for you to nourish your body. Long Feiyi was very calm. He lifted his robe and sat down. Seeing that Han Yunqi was still standing there, he knocked on the seat beside him, indicating for her to sit down. The mermaid soldiers aren't afraid of being exposed. Han Yunqi was very surprised. The illusory sea lake was not frozen, so it was much easier for the mermaid soldiers to catch lobsters in the water. However, once they were seen by others, it would be a big problem. There's no one on the island. As Long Fei spoke, he picked up a piece of pink and chewy lobster meat. He originally wanted to put it in Han Yunqi's bowl, but seeing that she still wanted to say something, he directly stuffed it into her mouth. Han Yunqi, the foodie, immediately fell in love with it as soon as she ate it. Needless to say, the lobsters of Yuzhou Island lived up to their reputation. The meat was delicious and the texture was tough. Ordinary lobsters could not be compared to it. Anyway, it was fine as long as there was something to eat. It didn't matter where it came from. Han Yunqi soon ate with relish, and Long Fei looked quite satisfied at the sight. These lobsters were indeed not caught by him, but by the mermaid soldiers. However, he was a guard for the mermaid soldiers, and guarded the illusory sea lake alone for the whole afternoon. After Han Yunqi ate several pieces, she asked, "Your Highness, don't you want to eat?" Long Fei shook his head. "I don't like it very much." Han Yunqi was a foodie, but Long Fei was not. She was a carnivore, but Long Fei was very vegetarian. It had to be said that it was quite a tragedy for a foodie to meet a person who had no requirements for food, because they had no common language in the things they liked the most. However, Han Yunqi did not feel sad at all, because this guy who was not particular about food could always find a lot of things to nourish her body. Knowing Long Fei's habits, Han Yunqi did not persuade him anymore. Soon, she finished a steamed lobster alone. She thought that the lobsters were very big, so a basket could only hold 5 or 6 of them at most. Who knew that she would have lobsters for every meal for the next few days? Besides steamed lobsters, there were also boiled lobsters, roasted lobsters, salt and pepper lobsters, spicy lobsters, minced garlic lobsters, and so on. In any case, by the time they returned to Tianning's capital city, Han Yunqi wanted to vomit at the sight of ordinary lobsters, much less ordinary lobsters. Unexpectedly, Long Fei threw a lobster to the kitchens as soon as they returned to the Duke of Qin's estate and told them to stew an old hen. Just who was it that told Long Fei that old hens were good for nourishing the body? Please stand out. Esteemed Wang Fei promises she won't beat you to death. The head chef of the kitchens held a chicken in his left hand and a lobster in his right, his face bewildered. He didn't know where to start. In all his years as a chef, he'd never heard of lobsters being used to stew an old hen. What would it taste like if they were stewed together? The head chef had no idea what it would taste like, much less Han Yunqi. But before the head chef finished stewing, Chu Shifeng suddenly reported, "Your Highness, something's happened at the hidden pavilion. It's better if you make a trip there." Long Fei didn't ask any questions, but told Han Yunqi to rest well before hurrying out the door. As soon as he reached the door, Chu Shifeng murmured, "Your Highness, Medicine Ghost Valley sent word that Bear Chuan's been looking for you. He says he wants you to go pick it up personally." So fast? Long Fei was surprised. "I don't know what's going on, but Gu Qisha wouldn't dare to extort you." Chu Shifeng paused, then added, "Your Highness," esteemed Wang Fei sighed. Han Yunqi had asked Long Fei about the 15th, but Long Fei had told her that Gu Qisha hadn't found the medicine yet. Long Fei paused, then simply said, "Let's go." Master and servant set out that very night for Medicine Ghost Valley. But as soon as they were far enough away, Gu appeared at the gates of the Duke of Qin's estate. This time, he didn't climb over the walls, but openly knocked on the door with a large bag of items. But a group of guards appeared before the page boy who opened the door. His Highness Duke of Qin had ordered them to break Gu's legs as soon as he showed up. Gu swept his gaze around the room before chuckling. "Is this how your Duke of Qin's estate treats its guests? You're a guest too?" "Pa," the guard said bluntly. Gu Qishao's eyes turned fierce as he suddenly kicked out with his foot. The force of his kick sent the guard flying. "If Han Yunqi wasn't here, I wouldn't have come even if Long Fei begged me." "Impudence!" The leader of the guards roared angrily. More than a dozen guards behind him charged forward, while another dozen guards flew out from the side to surround Gu. A few guards wouldn't be able to beat Gu Qisha, but a large group of them could at least trample him a few times, right? Soon, Gu was surrounded by more than 30 guards, and a fierce battle ensued. Chapter 442. If it was in the past, the Duke of Qin's hidden guards would never listen to Han Yunqi. But now, with her command, everyone stopped. Gu turned around from the encirclement and saw Han Yunqi standing at the doorway, slender and elegant. His murderous aura disappeared and was replaced with a smile. "Poison lass, long time no see. Did you miss Qi, brother?" How long had it been since he last saw this lass? He was the only one who knew what was going on. Han Yunqi was also thinking about how long it had been since she last saw this fellow. She almost couldn't remember the last time she saw him. She almost believed that this fellow wouldn't pester her anymore. Han Yunqi walked over. "Long time no see. I thought I'd never see you again." "So, you thought I was dead?" Gu's smile became even more brilliant as he walked towards Han Yunqi. The hidden guards didn't want to retreat, but they were even more afraid of offending this princess consort than before. If they offended her, who would speak up for them in front of His Highness Duke of Qin in the future? Han Yunqi stopped in front of Gu and looked him up and down. She sighed softly. "AI, it's a pity that you're still alive." Gu looked very hurt as he stared at Han Yunqi. He shook his head and didn't speak. Han Yunqi didn't banter with him anymore. "Do you need something from this princess consort?" "There's nothing special about a princess consort. It's not nice to call yourself that," Gu said seriously. "If there's nothing else, I'm leaving. You can continue fighting," Han Yunqi said and really turned to leave. Gu anxiously grabbed her hand in front of everyone. "There's really something." Seeing this, everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. Han Yunqi flung his hand away as if she had been electrocuted. She angrily said, "Don't touch me, or I won't be polite." Although he was used to being rejected, Gu's heart still skipped a beat. He clearly felt that this girl was different from before. Although she was angry when he touched her before, she wasn't this angry. This time, there was a trace of disgust in her anger. Why did this happen? Han Yunqi didn't believe that men and women shouldn't touch each other, but after being with Long Feiyi for a long time, she unconsciously minded some things. Previously, she didn't think it was a big deal when they held hands. She just hated this guy's flirting. But now, she actually felt guilty towards Long Feiyi. She felt that she had done something wrong to him. She did not notice the disappointment in Gu's eyes as she urged, "If you have something to say it quickly." Gu had already recovered his smile. "This is an extremely important matter. Aren't you going to invite me to your residence to have a cup of tea before we talk? Please." Han Yunqi was very generous, but she was puzzled in her heart. This guy really knew how to pick the right time. The moment Long Feiyi left, he arrived right after. Then he wouldn't have been chased down by multiple assassins before he even reached Tianning's capital. He had almost exposed his identity as a poison goo human in order to draw the assassins away. But this lass was telling him that it was disgusting. Gu had no idea that Han Yunqi had been eating giant lobsters for nearly 10 days now. She was already disgusted at the sight of them, so he really felt hurt. He stared silently at Han Yunqi for a long time without saying a word. It was also at this moment that Han Yunqi saw the darkness in Gu's eyes for the first time. She gave him a probing kick. "Hey!" Gu Qixiao glanced at her without a word, then quietly tied up the bundle. "Hey? That's the important matter you were talking about?" Han Yunqi asked. "Glutton, what's so important about eating?" Gu looked askance at her, his tone still doting. Han Yunqi exhaled when she saw that this fellow was finally responding to her. She asked seriously, "Gu, Seventh Master, just what kind of important matter do you want to discuss with me?" Gu chuckled. "I don't want to talk about it now. Goodbye." So speaking, he picked up the large bag and turned to leave. Han Yunqi was flabbergasted. This should be the first time this fellow has left of his own accord. Could it be that he's really angry? Was he really angry because she rejected his giant lobsters? Han Yunqi didn't say a word the entire way to the door, but she couldn't help but burst into laughter. If she'd known things would turn out like this, she would have been more ruthless. If she'd angered this fellow, he might have stopped teasing her in the future. The shadow guards by her side were all puzzled as well. How could a demon like Gu leave so soon after coming in? Were their eyes playing tricks on them? Gu left the Duke of Qin's estate before turning to look at Han Yunqi. His long, narrow eyes were still smiling brightly. Poison, lass, maybe next time. Next time we meet, it'll definitely be something big. There was a hidden meaning in his words. Even Han Yunqi, who didn't trust him, could tell that something was amiss. She chased after him. Gu, just what do you want? Can't you talk properly? Gu waved her back. Take care of your body and wait for me. Han Yunqi was even more puzzled. She wanted to ask more questions, but Gu had already used his lightness techniques to leave. Did something big really happen? What does he want to do? Han Yunqi muttered to herself. She couldn't help but feel that Gu Qixiao was different this time. After Gu left, the shadow guards sent a messenger pigeon to Long Fei Yi. Long Fei Yi and Chu Shifeng were still on their way to Medicine Ghost Valley. As soon as he read the letter, Long Fei Yi was both unhappy and bewildered. Gu hasn't shown his face in ages. Your Highness, I just heard the news yesterday. The City of Daughters and Carefree City's top assassins are all hunting him down. I don't know who he's offended, Chu Shifeng replied. Long Fei Yi only smiled coldly. If he hadn't offended the City of Daughters and Carefree City, he would have paid a sky-high price to hire assassins to kill Gu long ago. Han Yunqi actually invited him in for tea. Very well. He'd settle the score when he got back. It was already the middle of the night, but Long Fei Yi and Chu Shifeng didn't rest. Instead, they rode as fast as they could. Meanwhile, Han Yunqi was still up in the Duke of Qin's estate. She felt uneasy after being disturbed by Gu, but she couldn't guess what Gu was up to. She planned to wait until morning to do her experiments, but now she simply got up. Han Yunqi went downstairs and bumped into Bailey Mingxiang. Bailey Mingxiang's injuries had mostly healed, and he'd long gotten out of bed. Why aren't you sleeping? Han Yunqi asked. I was thinking about things and couldn't sleep, Bailey Mingxiang said mildly. She'd heard about Jun Yixie's escape and knew esteemed Wang Fei had returned. She'd been looking for a chance to comfort esteemed Wang Fei, but esteemed Wang Fei had been too busy and hadn't gotten a chance to talk to her yet. If you can't sleep, then come help me. I've already figured out a way to check if there's any explosive residue in the charcoal ash. Guess what it is? Han Yunqi entered the study and placed porcelain bottles and plates on the table. Seeing esteemed Wang Fei like this, Bailey Mingxiang knew there was no need for words of comfort. This woman was much more optimistic and open-minded than she'd imagined. She followed her in and locked the door behind her. If the furnace explosion had been an accident, then there were only a few suspects. As long as they had evidence, they'd have to interrogate the culprit. Whether it was an accident or not, they'd have to look through the charcoal ash to find the proof. There were porcelain bottles on the table, some for charcoal ash, others for poison. Bailey Mingxiang carefully looked them over one by one before asking in confusion, Esteemed Wang Fei, Mingxiang is stupid. I don't understand what this is for. It's for poisoning, Han Yunqi said seriously. She'd thought of this method before going to Fishery Island, but she hadn't decided what kind of poison to use. She'd thought of everything on the way back. Poisoning the charcoal ash? Bailey Mingxiang asked in a doubtful voice. Han Yunqi was very surprised. She never thought that Bailey Mingxiang would understand. What she needed to do was to poison the charcoal ash. She had found a kind of poison that could be mixed with any explosive substance to create a new kind of poison. As long as this poison was poured into the charcoal ash, once a new kind of poison was formed, it would mean that there was still explosive residue in the charcoal ash. It was just that they hadn't been able to find it before. Bailey Mingxiang understood this principle. She took the initiative to ask, Esteemed Wang Fei, I'll try it. Han Yunqi agreed. Bailey Mingxiang carefully worked, pouring the poison into the charcoal ash. Very soon, the charcoal ash and the poison turned into a paste. It began to bubble and gradually released a disgusting smell. Smelling the smell, Han Yunqi and Bailey Mingxiang looked at each other and smiled. As expected, there was still explosive residue in the charcoal ash. Chapter 443. Previously, Han Yunqi had ordered people to send the charcoal ash after the explosion to a professional for testing. Unfortunately, they could not find any explosive residue. Therefore, The matter of the furnace explosion had been delayed until now. Now that the explosive residue was found, things would be easier to handle. Whether it was man-made or an accident would be revealed very soon. Han Yunxi and Bailey Mingxiang left the study without alerting Zhao Mama and Su Xiaoyu. They quietly left Leisurely Cloud Pavilion and went to the storeroom. Other than the charcoal ash from the day of the explosion that was in Han Yunxi's hands, the charcoal that was not used up that day and the remaining charcoal from Leisurely Cloud Pavilion were all placed together with the remaining charcoal ash in the storeroom. Esteemed Princess Consort, are we going to burn the charcoal now and test it for poison? Bailey Mingxiang asked. Su Donglin has already lit all the charcoal once. None of them exploded. Han Yunxi said lightly. Bailey Mingxiang was shocked. Just from the explosion that morning, it's obvious that someone tampered with it. Not necessarily. I've asked a professional to analyze it. Some explosive substances have very special detonation points. Sometimes they explode after being lit, and sometimes they don't explode no matter what. Maybe someone really tampered with the charcoal in the furnace that morning. Maybe it was just a coincidence. The charcoal in the furnace that day was of just the right temperature, so it exploded. Although Han Yunxi did not understand the principle of charcoal, when she was making poison, the amount, temperature, moisture, and even the temperature of the water would all affect the toxicity. Therefore, she could understand the professional's analysis. For example, some poisons would be triggered by weather conditions. It could be that someone had used the weather to poison it, like the poisonous fog on Yuzhou Island. It could also be that there was poison in the air itself, but it had not been triggered until it met with a special weather condition. Therefore, if they wanted to know whether the explosion was man-made or an accident, they would need sufficient evidence. And this evidence was the explosive residue that she had found after inspecting it. Now, they only needed to burn the remaining charcoal from that day, from Leisurely Cloud Pavilion, and from the same batch in the residence. Then, they would test the charcoal ash with poison. If explosives were detected, it would mean that the explosion that day was an accident. At the very least, the people in the Leisurely Cloud Pavilion would not be suspicious. However, if there was no explosive material, it could prove that the charcoal used on the day of the explosion had been tampered with. Han Yunxi had always been a cautious person. She was even more cautious when facing the suspects in this case. She didn't want to think too much about it. She only hoped that she could get enough evidence to prove that it was an accident and convince herself and Long Fei Yi. Seeing that Bailey Mingxiang did not speak, Han Yunxi asked, "Have you thought it through?" Bailey Mingxiang frowned and thought for a moment, then smiled. "I understand. Esteemed Princess Consort is truly thoughtful. The principle of using poison is the same. You have to consider all aspects. It's not as simple as just using the poison." Han Yunxi said seriously, and Bailey Mingxiang silently noted it down. The master and servant chatted as they walked towards the storeroom. However, who knew that Su Donglin would suddenly run over and gasp for breath? "Esteemed Princess Consort, something bad has happened. If there's a problem, we can talk about it. Why are you in such a hurry?" Han Yunxi reprimanded unhappily. However, Su Donglin was still very anxious. "Esteemed Princess Consort, our charcoal is completely soaked." "What?" Han Yunxi could not remain calm. "It rained a few days ago and the storeroom was leaking. We only discovered it today. Quite a few things in the storeroom are also wet." Su Donglin explained. "Let's go and take a look." Han Yunxi's heart grew heavy. Wasn't this too much of a coincidence? Even the latrines in the Duke of Qin's estate were made of glazed tiles that couldn't be shaken by wind or rain. They were very sturdy and wouldn't be eroded by the wind. So how could something like this happen? Moreover, it happened in the storehouse. When she rushed to the storeroom, the hidden guards had already asked the craftsman to inspect the room. "What's the situation?" Han Yunxi asked seriously. "Esteemed Princess Consort, it looks like someone deliberately did it." The craftsman said seriously. Han Yunxi's heart sank even more. "Why do you say that?" "The leaking was caused by the loosening of the roof tiles. The area of loosening is quite large. Based on the loosening, someone took something from inside the room and did not step on the roof to loosen it." The craftsman answered truthfully. When these words came out, everyone was shocked. It was clear that someone had used the rainy day to destroy the charcoal. This person is quite skilled. Since they could enter, they did not directly destroy the charcoal. Instead, they used the heavy rain these past few days to create an illusion of an accident. This person's thoughts are quite deep, Bailey Mingxiang said. Since things had already gotten to this point, why would they still need to do a poisoning experiment? That explosion was not an accident. Someone had deliberately set it up. Destroying the charcoal like this was to destroy the evidence. She never thought that the culprit would not only commit a crime in her leisurely cloud pavilion, but also in the storeroom. Did anyone come to the storeroom these past few days? Han Yunqi asked seriously. The storeroom was not like other places. Aside from the person in charge of the storeroom, outsiders had to register to enter and leave. Su Donglin quickly presented the register. Han Yunqi flipped through the last few days and did not find Zhao Mama and Su Xiaoyu's names. Aside from Steward Luo and 2 manservants, there were no outsiders. Under normal circumstances, Zhao Mama and Su Xiaoyu would not come to the storeroom. Could it be that the suspects were not the 2 of them? Or perhaps there was more than one suspect. Even in the safest place, the Duke of Qin's manor, there were spies. Han Yunqi gently stroked the wet charcoal. Her heart flashed with a frightening light. Don't think that this princess consort can't find evidence just because it's wet. Coldly she said, don't make this matter public for now. No matter if it's 1 or 2 spies, this princess consort will not let them go. For the next few days, Han Yunqi continued to look for poisons. Poisons that would react with explosive materials in a certain humidity. Zhao Mama and Su Xiaoyu had not come to the storeroom, and the other servants had not been to the leisurely cloud pavilion. Under such circumstances, if she found explosive materials in the wet charcoal, it would mean that the charcoal that was sent to the leisurely cloud pavilion contained explosive materials. Zhao Mama and Su Xiaoyu would not be suspects. On the contrary, if she did not find any explosive materials in the wet charcoal, then the suspects would not only be Zhao Mama and Su Xiaoyu, but also the people in the storeroom. Everything in the Duke of Qin's manor was normal. Han Yunqi had already deliberately announced that the explosion was an accident. Most of the servants also thought that it was an accident and that it had already passed. No one mentioned it again. Under the seemingly calm surface, the evidence and suspects had already taken shape. Han Yunqi and Bailey Mingxiang were seizing the time to look for poisons. At this time, there was one person who was very nervous. This person was none other than Su Xiaoyu. She was very clear that the Duke of Qin's manor was so calm during this period, but it did not mean that the case had passed. The more Han Yunqi and Long Feiyi did not say anything, the more nervous she became. She could not escape. Sooner or later, she would be caught. She knew that she had already been listed as a suspect and could not escape. Therefore, she also smashed the pot that had already been broken. She had to strive to see Han Yunqi's back before she was caught. Unfortunately, she did not have the chance. Previously, Long Feiyi and Han Yunqi were often together, so she did not dare to make a move. Later, Han Yunqi went out with Long Feiyi again, so she did not have the chance. She thought that no matter how Long Feiyi and Han Yunqi investigated the explosion case, she would first wet the charcoal. At least this would reduce their clues and buy herself some time. Bailey Mingxiang absolutely didn't dare to refuse Zhao Mama's request when she mentioned His Highness Duke of Qin. His Highness Duke of Qin had been nourishing esteemed Wang Fei's body recently, and everyone in the prince's estate knew about it. Bailey Mingxiang's eyes hid incomparably complex emotions as she said indifferently, "All right, I'll send it in." Unexpectedly, Su Xiaoyu discreetly avoided her and strode in with the food basket. Su Xiaoyu's chance had come. Chapter 444. Su Xiaoyu usually liked to run around, so seeing this, Zhao Mama didn't take it to heart. She chuckled and held Bailey Mingxiang's hand. "Mingxiang, come eat with me. Don't starve yourself." Bailey Mingxiang was very anxious. Esteemed Wang Fei was in the innermost part of the study making the antidote, so she couldn't hear the movement at the door. Moreover, when she was serious, she wouldn't pay attention to her surroundings. It wouldn't be good if Su Xiaoyu, the suspect, entered the study and saw the wet charcoal on the table. Ignoring Zhao Mama, Bailey Mingxiang suddenly broke free and chased after her while shouting, "Xiao Yuer, Don't disturb esteemed Wang Fei. Esteemed Wang Fei is busy with something. Shouting like this would at least remind esteemed Wang Fei. However, it turned out that Bailey Mingxiang had underestimated Su Xiaoyu. Soon, a loud bang came from inside the room. Bailey Mingxiang was frightened and rushed over. Zhao Mama also rushed over and saw that the soup bowl had shattered on the ground, and Su Xiaoyu was desperately splashing cold water on esteemed Wang Fei. The hot soup got splashed. Wu-Wu, quickly bring cold water over. There isn't enough water here. Wu-Wu, I didn't do it on purpose. Wu-Wu. Su Xiaoyu was crying miserably. As she cried, she hurriedly scooped cold water and poured it on Han Yunqi's back. Han Yunqi's brows were tightly knitted. Her entire back was burning with incomparable pain. Everything had happened so suddenly that she felt like she was in a dream. She was concentrating on making the antidote. Just as she was about to make the antidote, she was interrupted by Bailey Mingxiang's voice. She knew that Su Xiaoyu had come in, but she didn't expect it to be so fast. She was about to turn around to see what was going on when Su Xiaoyu suddenly rushed over with a bowl of hot soup. The entire bowl of hot soup splashed on her back. It hurt. Su Xiaoyu used her lightness techniques to silently draw closer. Naturally, Han Yunqi wouldn't be able to guard against her. This time, she was throwing caution to the wind. No matter how Han Yunqi would suspect her or deal with her afterwards, she didn't care. She had to make Han Yunqi take off her clothes now. He had to see Han Yunqi's back. Zhao Mama's face turned pale with fright. The first thought that came to her mind wasn't to save her, but to explain things to His Highness Duke of Qin. Granny Zhao, find some water, quick. Han Yunqi said loudly. She felt that her back was burning, so she didn't dare to move. She was afraid that she would rub her clothes and cause more trouble. Granny Zhao finally came back to her senses and quickly ran out to fetch some cold water. Bailey Mingxiang did not panic as she snatched the water from Su Xiaoyu's hands. While helping the princess consort cool down, she angrily rebuked, "Stinky girl, you've caused a disaster. Move aside if you're so clumsy." God knows if this brat did it on purpose or not. She was too suspicious. She couldn't let her meet the princess consort again. Su Xiaoyu originally wanted to cry out for justice, but when she saw that Han Yunqi had already begun to take off her clothes, she closed her mouth and knelt to the side. Han Yunqi was very clear that her back needed urgent treatment. Otherwise, her injuries would be as serious as Bailey Mingxiang's. For the time being, she couldn't be bothered to hold Su Xiaoyu accountable. While the cold water cooled her back and cooled her clothes, she had to quickly remove them and separate them from the wound as quickly as possible. She didn't want them to stick together and suffer more pain. She was only wearing her underclothes and outer clothes. The outer clothes were easy to take off. She endured the pain and took them off herself. However, some parts of the underclothes stuck to the wound on her back. Princess consort, I'll do it. Bailey Mingxiang helped her rinse the cold water with one hand and carefully helped her remove her clothes with the other. Soon, Zhao Mama also came to help. The underclothes had already been removed from her shoulders and were being carefully removed. There were several places that needed to be rinsed with cold water to lower the temperature and carefully removed. Han Yunqi sat motionless. Bailey Mingxiang and Zhao Mama were so nervous that they didn't even dare to breathe. They very carefully removed the clothes from the ulcers inch by inch. Zhao Mama should have seen this kind of accident many times in the palace and should be very calm. However, at this moment, her hands were trembling more than anyone else's. It was for no other reason than the fact that Qin Wang Fei was the one injured. Although she kept telling herself not to think about it, she still couldn't help but think about it. What would His Highness Duke of Qin do if he found out? What would His Highness Duke of Qin do if he came back? Zhao Mama, calm down. Bailey Mingxiang couldn't watch anymore. His Highness will be furious when he comes back. We'll all die. Zhao Mama spoke the truth. Bailey Mingxiang's hands stiffened, but he remained calm. Even if we have to die, we have to serve the princess consort well first. Han Yunqi heard these words and engraved them in her heart. Those who deserve to die will definitely die. This princess consort can protect those who don't deserve to die. Han Yunqi said coldly. Zhao Mama finally calmed down a little, but Su Xiaoyu's heart skipped a beat. She was already prepared to be executed, But when she heard these words, she was actually a little scared. However, she quickly forgot that if they wanted to execute her, they would need evidence. Zhao Mama was so scared. So she was very suspicious, wasn't she? At this time, half of the underclothes had been removed. Su Xiaoyu knelt to the side, watching with wide eyes and waiting. As the clothes gradually came off, she slowly became nervous. After sneaking into the Duke of Qin's residence for so long, she always thought that she had a good way to complete her mission and continue to stay in the Duke of Qin's residence to provide intelligence for her master. Unfortunately, many of her attempts had failed. In the end, she had no choice but to use this direct and stupid method. Was Han Yunxi the person her master was looking for? Was there a phoenix birthmark on her back? The secret would soon be revealed. Su Xiaoyu thought that as long as she could find the answer and find a way to send out the information, even if she died in the Duke of Qin's residence, it would be worth it. It could be considered as repaying her master's kindness in raising her. The clothes had almost reached her waist. Han Yunxi's back was only left with the thin belt of her undergarment. Her jade back was very beautiful, smooth, and delicate. It was a pity that 2 large patches of ulcers had been burned. One was below her shoulder, and the other was in the center of her back. The burning pain was indescribable. Han Yunxi tightly knitted her brows and didn't cry out in pain. However, her clothes had already been removed from the 2 large patches of ulcers. She secretly let out a sigh of relief and said, "Mingxiang, bring me my medical pouch. There's medicine inside." Bailey Mingxiang went to fetch the medical pouch. Zhao Mama continued to carefully help Han Yunxi remove her underclothes. Su Xiaoyu unconsciously held her breath as she stared at Han Yunxi's exposed lumbar vertebrae, anticipating the answer that was about to be revealed. Finally, the underclothes were completely removed, and Zhao Mama took it away. Su Xiaoyu widened her eyes to look, but she discovered that there was nothing at Han Yunxi's lumbar vertebrae. Since her master suspected this woman and spent so much effort to let her enter the Duke of Qin's residence, he must have sufficient reason to suspect Han Yunxi. Who knew that there was actually nothing? It couldn't be, right? After paying such a huge price, Su Xiaoyu couldn't help but feel a little disappointed. However, Zhao Mama was walking back and forth behind Han Yunxi, so it was inevitable that she couldn't see clearly. She took a few more glances, but there was still nothing. Could it be that there really wasn't anything? Su Xiaoyu was about to scoot closer when Lil Thing suddenly jumped out and stepped on her head. Lil Thing had just returned from playing outside and was stunned by the scene in the room. When it saw Su Xiaoyu kneeling there, it knew that Mama Yunxi's injuries were caused by Su Xiaoyu. This damned brat. As soon as Lil Thing landed on Su Xiaoyu's head, it used all its strength to stomp, scratch, and even bite Su Xiaoyu's hair. It looked like it was about to rip off Su Xiaoyu's hair and bite her scalp. Su Xiaoyu was scared to death. "Esteemed Wang Fei, save me. Save me, you didn't do it on purpose." Sob sob. "Esteemed Wang Fei, you's begging you, spare me." Sob sob, save me, sob sob. It had to be said that Su Xiaoyu's acting skills were top-notch. Her crying skills were top-notch as well. She sobbed with tears and snot, but didn't chase Lil Thing away. Instead, she pitifully curled up into a ball and collapsed on the ground, crying miserably. Han Yunxi looked over. The last person she wanted to suspect was Su Xiaoyu. She was only 7.5 years old, but right now, she was the biggest suspect. Today's burns were too strange. "Esteemed Wang Fei, save me. Esteemed Wang Fei." Sob sob. "I didn't do it on purpose. I really didn't do it on purpose." Su Xiaoyu curled up on the ground, crying and wailing with all her might. Lil Thing wouldn't let her go and pulled out a bunch of her hair with its claws. How could Zhao Mama know that the furnace explosion wasn't an accident? She didn't connect the two matters together. Seeing a child being tormented like this, she couldn't bear it. Esteemed Wang Fei, she wanted to plead for leniency, but when she thought about how she might not be able to escape this disaster, she didn't know how to plead. "Lil Thing, just keep an eye on her. I'll deal with her myself." Han Yunxi finally opened her mouth. Even at this point, she still had a trace of hope in her heart. She hoped that the child she brought back out of goodwill was really just a child. Lilthing immediately stopped and sat on Su Xiaoyu's head, waiting. Su Xiaoyu didn't dare to move, let alone look at Han Yunqi's back. Han Yunqi lay down on a warm couch. Once she lay down, Zhao Mama quickly pulled a silk blanket over Han Yunqi's waist. She couldn't catch a cold after being burned like this. Bailey Mingxiang hurriedly treated the wound and applied medicine. She had been served by esteemed Wang Fei before, so she had learned quite a bit. She was competent enough to do the job. Su Xiaoyu lay on the ground in the distance. She was certain that Han Yunqi didn't have a birthmark on her back. Bailey Mingxiang was focused and Han Yunqi was also silent. Zhao Mama inadvertently saw several plates of charcoal ash on the table and suddenly understood everything. She also fell silent. Originally, Leisurely Cloud Pavilion was the most relaxed and leisurely place in the Duke of Qin's manor. But now, the atmosphere was tense and strange. It was so heavy that Zhao Mama couldn't breathe. Very quickly, Bailey Mingxiang finished treating and bandaging the 2 ulcers. Without needing Zhao Mama's help, Zhao Mama looked at Su Xiaoyu. Seeing Su Xiaoyu's pitiful little body, her sunken eyes dimmed. Esteemed Wang Fei, these 2 wounds have been treated. There are still some red areas. Although it's not a big problem, you should still apply some medicine. Bailey Mingxiang seriously asked. Han Yunqi only gave a faint sound of agreement. Bailey Mingxiang applied the medicine to the red areas and carefully examined them. She checked all the way down from the shoulder and saw that the waist was a little red. She carefully lifted the silk blanket. But who knew that when she lifted the silk blanket, she would immediately suck in a cold breath? Heavens, how could this be? Chapter 445. Bailey Mingxiang had never imagined that she would see something like this on esteemed Wang Fei's back. It was a birthmark of a phoenix spreading its wings. A phoenix feather birthmark. The birthmark was red, but the color was very light. If she hadn't been so close, she wouldn't have been able to see it. Bailey Mingxiang was stunned by the sight, her heart pounding wildly in her chest. This birthmark was incredible. If she remembered correctly, this phoenix feather was the unique birthmark of Western Qin's imperial family. When she was young, she had read about the phoenix feather birthmark in a secret history of the Great Qin Empire in the Tang sect. All the daughters of Western Qin's imperial family had a phoenix feather birthmark. This wasn't an open secret. Bailey Mingxiang had only read about it in a secret history. There were dozens of secret histories of the Great Qin Empire in the Tang sect, but she couldn't remember which one she had read about it in. However, she was certain that this was true. His Highness Duke of Qin and Aunt Ru had always paid close attention to the 7 noble families, but they hadn't paid much attention to the Western Qin's imperial family. This was because the Western Qin's imperial family had been exterminated. Many people knew that the last bloodline of the Western Qin's imperial family had been shot and killed by the Nether clan. The Western Qin's imperial family had truly become history. There was no need to investigate anything related to the Western Qin's imperial family. But why would esteemed Wang Fei have a phoenix feather birthmark on her body? Bailey Mingxiang didn't have time to think about why there was an orphan of the Western Qin's imperial family. She was such a calm person, but at this moment, her hands couldn't stop trembling. This matter was too serious. A birthmark couldn't be faked, so esteemed Wang Fei had to be an orphan of the Western Qin's imperial family. This identity was undoubtedly fatal to His Highness Duke of Qin. Unfortunately, His Highness Duke of Qin doted on this woman so much. Did His Highness Duke of Qin know that the phoenix feather birthmark was the symbol of the Western Qin's imperial family? Had he seen esteemed Wang Fei's birthmark before? And did esteemed Wang Fei know about it herself? Seeing that Bailey Mingxiang hadn't applied any medicine, Han Yunqi asked calmly, "What's wrong? Did my injuries scare you?" At this moment, Granny Zhao also turned her head and looked over. Bailey Mingxiang shuddered and hurriedly covered her with the silk quilt. "It's okay. I've applied medicine. I want to let the wound dry." As she spoke, she glanced at Zhao Mama. Seeing Zhao Mama's absent-minded appearance, she assumed that she hadn't noticed the faint birthmark when she was covering the princess consort with the quilt. However, even if she saw it, she would only treat it as an ordinary birthmark. She did not know anything about Western Qin. Hidden guards couldn't come in as they pleased. With the little thing here, she could rest assured that Su Xiaoyu wouldn't be able to escape. As soon as she left Leisurely Cloud Pavilion, Bailey Mingxiang let out a long breath. She silently told herself to stay calm. She had to wait for His Highness Duke of Qin to return before deciding whether or not to tell him about the birthmark. Han Yunqi lay on the bed, her originally bright and lively eyes dimmed by 30% and became 70% deeper. Although the ulcer on her back had been treated in time, and the burning sensation had lessened by a lot after applying medicine, it still hurt. The burning sensation and the tightness gradually spread from the wound to her entire back. The most important thing she needed to do now was to continue lying on the bed and wait for a day or two for the pain to subside before moving again. Moreover, she had to move carefully. However, the pain in her back was ultimately no match for the pain in her heart, just like how the wounds on her body were no match for the pain in her heart. After resting for a while, Han Yunqi endured the pain and resolutely got up. The poison to test the wet charcoal was almost ready. She had to continue. Since the explosion, this was the first time she couldn't wait to find out the truth. However, when she passed by Su Xiaoyu, Han Yunqi stopped and said indifferently, "Xiaoyu, was it an accident? If you confess, you will be lenient. If you resist, you will be severely punished." Su Xiaoyu was very surprised by these words. She didn't expect that Han Yunqi would still ask her this at this time. After the explosion, she had been worried that Han Yunqi wouldn't be able to find the culprit and would cut her and Zhao Momo down as the two most suspicious people and execute them. Now it seemed that she had overestimated Han Yunqi's heart. This woman wasn't a ruthless character. Su Xiaoyu didn't hesitate to raise her head and asked her back, "Esteemed Princess Consort, don't you believe me? Are you suspecting me?" Leniency for confessing and severity for resisting were all lies. She didn't believe this. Since Han Yunqi still didn't intend to directly judge her as the culprit, then she could make good use of Han Yunqi's soft-heartedness. A sneer flashed past Han Yunqi's eyes. She had asked deliberately. She also didn't believe in leniency for confessing and severity for resisting. Once she was guilty, no matter if she confessed or resisted, she would not let her off easily. She endured the pain and walked to the desk step by step to continue the unfinished work. Very quickly, the poison was successfully concocted. All the servants in the Duke of Qin's manor, men and women, old and young, had gathered at the Sunset Pavilion in the garden. When Han Yunqi, Zhao Momo, and Su Xiaoyu arrived, there was a hubbub of voices as everyone was discussing spiritedly. When they saw esteemed Princess Consort arrive, everyone quieted down. Bailey Mingxiang and Su Donglin hurried over to help. Han Yunqi brought the charcoal ash, wet charcoal, and poisonous liquid one by one on the stone table in the pavilion. A few days ago, the furnace in Leisurely Cloud Pavilion exploded. Recently, the storeroom leaked and the charcoal was completely wet. Also, this princess consort was scalded today. These successive incidents, were they accidents or man-made? Are there any spies in the Duke of Qin's manor? How many? Today, this princess consort will give everyone a definite answer. Han Yunqi's voice was not loud, but it had the power to intimidate people. She had the majesty of the Duke of Qin's manor's mistress. When her words came out, the entire crowd was in an uproar. Other than the explosion, no one knew about the other two incidents. They never thought that the peaceful Duke of Qin's manor would have hidden dangers. Su Xiaoyu stood to the side with a trace of ridicule in her eyes. Han Yunqi had brought this matter in front of everyone. Without a doubt, she wanted to use this opportunity to intimidate everyone and dispel any thoughts of betrayal. However, without sufficient evidence, it would be very difficult for her to convince everyone. Instead, she would become a joke. After everyone quieted down, Han Yunqi pointed to the charcoal and poisonous liquid bottles on the table and explained in detail how the poison was produced by mixing the poisonous liquid and explosive materials. Everyone listened in a daze, but in the end, they all understood. Everyone sighed in their hearts. Actually, esteemed Princess Consort didn't need to be so serious. If there were any suspicious servants, she could just convict them and put them to death. It was normal for large families to beat servants to death, let alone a place like the Duke of Qin's manor. However, It had to be said that esteemed Princess Consort's way of handling things was enough to convince people and earn their respect. Su Xiaoyu also listened attentively. She never thought that Han Yunqi would be able to think of this method and even find the poison. It had to be said that she was very impressed. She silently watched as Han Yunqi poured the poisonous liquid into the charcoal. Her clear black and white eyes flashed with a trace of coldness that didn't match her age. Very quickly, the charcoal ashes were contaminated with poison and a foul smell spread out. Han Yunqi raised the porcelain plate and said indifferently, "There are explosive materials in the charcoal ashes." Following that, she contaminated the 2 plates of wet charcoal with poison. However, the result was unexpected. There was no change in the poison. These 2 plates of wet charcoal were not poisonous. There was no need for Han Yunqi to say more. Everyone understood. Only the charcoal in the leisurely cloud pavilion's furnace contained explosive materials. Even the unburned charcoal in the leisurely cloud pavilion didn't contain explosive materials. There was no doubt that someone had deliberately tampered with the furnace. I think that no coincidence can explain this coincidence. However, the rainwater in the storeroom leaked and soaked the rest of the charcoal. This is also not a coincidence. Han Yunqi's tone had always been very calm, but this calmness gave people an unfathomable feeling that made people fearful for no reason. Su Donglin stood up and said coldly, "The craftsman proved that the roof tiles in the storeroom were tampered with by someone in the room. Therefore, someone deliberately destroyed the charcoal." Once these words were said, everyone couldn't hold back and began to talk. They never thought that there would be a spy in the strict and well-guarded Duke of Qin's mansion. Su Xiaoyu's eyes still flashed with a cold smile. So what if Han Yunqi found out about this? How could she prove that it was related to her? Important announcement. Sorry, 2 bugs have been fixed. First, the Black Clan in Chapter 440 that was previously fixed has been changed back. Jun Yixia was indeed from the Black Clan, not the Nether Clan. Second, it was written in Chapter 440 that Jun Yixia's grandfather shot the Western Qin baby boy. This was wrong. Jun Yixia's grandfather saw the Western Qin baby boy being shot to death by the Nether Clan, not him. It was also written in Chapter 260. Chapter 446. In the midst of the uproar, Han Yunqi raised her hand and everyone quieted down. However, at this time, someone couldn't help being curious and asked, "Princess Consort, who was the traitor?" Who would have thought that Han Yunqi's calm voice would suddenly turn cold? There are only a few people that have been in and out of the warehouse these past few days. Come, bring them all in. The secret guards brought in 6 servants. There were 3 maids in charge of the warehouse, 2 manservants, and housekeeper Luo. When everyone saw housekeeper Luo among them, they were all shocked. But housekeeper Luo was very calm as he kept his head up with a calm expression. "There are only 6 of you that have been in and out of the warehouse these past few days." Han Yunqi walked out of the pavilion and looked at the 6 servants. Her face was 30% cold and 70% serious. "His Highness and this princess will not allow traitors to exist here. Who was it that broke the roof of the warehouse? Either you stand up or—" Han Yunqi did not finish speaking. She looked at Su Donglin with her eyes, and Su Donglin immediately threw out a needleboard. This needleboard was as big as a stool, and it was densely covered in nails. Each one was shining with a cold light and was shockingly sharp. Most of the servants knew that this needleboard was a very terrifying torture tool. As long as one sat on it, all the nails would pierce their buttocks. The pain was indescribable, but it wasn't fatal. It would hurt for several days before they died from excessive blood loss. This was a kind of death that was worse than death. Housekeeper Luo's expression did not change as he remained calm. The other 2 manservants and 3 maids all had pale faces as their bodies trembled. There was no doubt that if the culprit did not stand up, none of them would be able to escape this disaster. Very quickly, the maids all kneeled down in fear. "Princess Consort, it wasn't me. Have mercy." "Princess Consort, I didn't do anything. I'm innocent." Su Xiaoyu was no longer as calm as before. Her brows were tightly knit as if she was thinking of something. However, at this time, Han Yunqi coldly said an old saying, "Resist and be strict, confess and—" Leniency. Su Xiaoyu's heart skipped a beat. She had a feeling that Han Yunqi was doing this on purpose. When he had said those words in the study room of the leisurely cloud pavilion, he had done it on purpose. It was not because he wanted to be lenient with her, but because he wanted her to hear it. Han Yunqi had already made up her mind. She was going to find out who the person in the warehouse was and then sell her out. Sure enough, the words "those who resist will be severely punished, those who confess will be lenient," caused the manservant to kneel down and kowtow again and again. "Princess Consort, please spare my life." This lowly one was threatened, and this lowly one had no choice but to do that. "Princess Consort, please spare me." So it was him, Butler Luo's follower. Seeing this, Su Xiaoyu's expression changed. She didn't expect that the person she had carefully selected would be so easily threatened. Steward Luo was furious and slapped Wang Laifu. "Wang Laifu, you bastard. I've always treated you well. How dare you do such a thing?" Wang Laifu let Steward Luo scold him and repeatedly begged for mercy, but he still didn't say who threatened him. "Who threatened you? Who was the one who tampered with the charcoal?" Han Yunqi asked in a loud voice. When a person was about to die, his courage grew. Wang Laifu actually talked to Han Yunqi about conditions. "Princess Consort, you have to promise to spare this lowly one's life first. Only then will this lowly one dare to speak." So bold. No wonder he had the heart to betray her. Han Yunqi's eyes flashed with a cold light and she coldly said, "All right, I'll spare your life and spare your punishment. Speak." Wang Laifu was overjoyed. How could he have known that there was something more painful than death and torture in this world? He didn't hesitate and immediately looked at Su Xiaoyu. In a moment, everyone also looked at Su Xiaoyu. It was her? Everyone was shocked. They never thought that this little child, who had been saved by the Princess Consort, would do such a terrible thing. She was so good at pretending, so good at acting. Han Yunqi was very calm. She already knew what was going on. It wasn't that she was soft-hearted, but rather that she wanted people to be convinced. Su Xiaoyu finally revealed her true face. She looked at Han Yunqi, and her lips curled into a cold smile. She was about to speak when Zhao Mama suddenly shouted, "Su Xiaoyu, you cheap girl! Has your conscience been eaten by a dog?" Zhao Mama didn't have any children, so she had always treated Su Xiaoyu as her own granddaughter. She thought that she would live for a few more years and watch this girl grow up. Then she would secretly save some dowry for this girl and marry her off in a grand manner. Who would have thought that she was a spy and actually hurt the Princess Consort like this? Zhao Mama angrily rushed over to hit her, but before she could make a move, Su Xiaoyu suddenly reached out to grab her. Fortunately, Su Donglin was careful and quickly kicked away Su Xiaoyu's hand. At the same time, 2 shadow guards appeared and captured Su Xiaoyu. The small chaos quickly calmed down. Wang Laifu was kneeling on the ground, and Su Xiaoyu's hands were tightly held. The entire crowd was silent. Han Yunqi walked in front of Su Xiaoyu. This girl didn't even reach her waist. She deliberately squatted down and asked coldly, "What else do you have to say?" Su Xiaoyu was speechless. She looked into Han Yunqi's eyes, and a trace of regret flashed in her heart. It was a pity that she hadn't met Han Yunqi earlier. If she had met Han Yunqi first instead of Chu Tianin, perhaps she would have been able to properly learn the poison arts from Han Yunqi. She was still convinced by this woman. Seeing that Su Xiaoyu wasn't speaking, Han Yunqi asked again, "Who sent you? What are you trying to do?" Su Xiaoyu still didn't speak. She definitely wouldn't betray her master. Han Yunqi waited for a moment and didn't waste any more time. She stood up and coldly said, "Someone come. Hang this stinky girl on a tree until she starves to death." So ruthless. Su Xiaoyu tightly clenched her teeth and stared at Han Yunqi, still not saying a word. Han Yunqi threw a bottle of poison at Wang Laifu. At first, Wang Laifu didn't understand what was going on, but after opening the bottle, he immediately understood what was going on. He was so frightened that he kowtowed loudly, "Esteemed Wang Fei, please spare me. Esteemed Wang Fei, you said you would spare my life. Esteemed Wang Fei, those who betray the Duke of Qin's estate can live, but they will definitely suffer a fate worse than death. Everyone present, look carefully." This Wang Fei will definitely not beat or scold anyone for no reason, nor will she wrongly accuse anyone. However, if this Wang Fei finds out, this will be the outcome. As she spoke, she immediately ordered Su Donglin, feed him the poison. Wang Laifu was so frightened that he actually wanted to run away. However, he was just a servant. No matter how strong he was, how could he deal with a professional hidden guard? Su Donglin quickly forced the entire bottle of poison down his throat. When he let go of Wang Laifu's mouth, Wang Laifu spat out a mouthful of black blood. Following that, the skin on his face began to fester, bit by bit, piece by piece. This Wang Fei promised him to spare his life. However, if he can't take it and wants to die, then don't blame this Wang Fei. Han Yunxi finished speaking and turned to leave. More than half of Wang Laifu's face had already festered, and it looked like it had spread to his neck. Everyone present watched with disgust and fear. Thinking back to the words that esteemed Wang Fei had just spoken, everyone's heart was filled with reverence. Yes, it was reverence, respect, and fear. This woman's words and actions were completely different from other masters. She made people wholeheartedly accept her and respect her. At the same time, her cleverness and ruthlessness also made people timid and fearful. Even when facing His Highness Duke of Qin, everyone only felt fear. However, when facing this female master, everyone's hearts were filled with respect. Su Xiaoyu looked at Wang Laifu for a while, then unconsciously looked away. She had always been bold and cruel, but Wang Laifu's fate made her heart tremble. Looking at Han Yunxi's departing figure and the frightened servants and hidden guards present, her face gradually turned pale. Only then did she realize that she was wrong. This woman wasn't soft-hearted. She was cruel, but she was also smart. She had used this case to intimidate everyone in the Duke of Qin's estate. In the future, it would be impossible to bribe or threaten the servants of the Duke of Qin's estate. Soon, Su Xiaoyu was hung by Su Donglin on the tallest tree in the Duke of Qin's estate. The crowd gradually dispersed. Wang Laifu struggled under Su Xiaoyu's feet, letting out anguished howls. Su Xiaoyu didn't dare to lower her head, afraid that she would become the next Wang Laifu. When there was no one around, she raised her head and fiercely spat out a hidden weapon into the air. The hidden weapon flew very, very high before exploding in the air, releasing a dazzling white light. The hidden guards in the shadows naturally saw it, but they didn't stop her. Esteemed Wang Fei was only keeping this stinky girl hanging. She must be using her to lure out the master behind her. Han Yunxi indeed had this idea. Unfortunately, she and the hidden guards were both wrong. At this time, a hidden spy near the Duke of Qin's estate saw the signal. After waiting for a while, he hurriedly retreated to report to Chu Tianin. Reporting to Master, Su Xiaoyu sent out a white light signal. Chu Tianin guessed that something had happened to Su Xiaoyu, but he never expected that Su Xiaoyu would send out a white light signal. His handsome brows knitted tightly as he asked seriously, "Did you see it clearly?" This subordinate saw it very clearly. "It was our signal. It was a white light." The spy replied truthfully. Chu Tianin seemed to have suffered a huge blow. He fell heavily into his chair and shook his head repeatedly. How could this be? How could? He had arranged for Su Xiaoyu to infiltrate the Duke of Qin's estate, so he had made sufficient preparations. Letters of various colors represented all kinds of unexpected situations. Even if Su Xiaoyu was at death's door, she still had to think of a way to send out the information she received. And the white light represented futility. It meant that Su Xiaoyu had seen Han Yunxi's back. Han Yunxi didn't have a phoenix birthmark, so she wasn't the person their Chu clan was looking for. His Chu clan was one of the 7 noble families, the Nether clan. The Nether clan that had shot and killed the infant of Western Qin's imperial family. At that time, many of the 7 noble families had seen the scene of the shooting. However, only the Shadow clan knew that the infant wasn't of the imperial family's bloodline, but a substitute. The last descendant of Western Qin's imperial family was a baby girl. In order to preserve her status, the imperial concubine had swapped the baby girl and adopted a baby boy. In order to protect the baby girl, the Nether clan had misled the East Qin imperial family and the other nobles into thinking that Western Qin had been destroyed. Therefore, they staged a show and pretended to betray Western Qin's imperial family by sending troops to kill the infant boy. Chapter 447. Han Yunqi wasn't the orphan of Western Qin's imperial clan. This news wasn't just a blow to Chu Tianyin, but the entire Chu clan. When Chu Tianyin first took over the investigation, his father had given him 3 years. He thought that was more than enough time to find the orphan of Western Qin's imperial clan and spread his influence into Tianning. Now that the trail was broken, where was he supposed to find another one? Seeing his master fall silent, the scout knew that the wisest thing to do now was to withdraw. Still, he couldn't help but muster up the courage to probe further. Master, they've hung little Yu from a tree. Without a doubt, they were trying to lure people to rescue her. Although it was a trap, the master had single-handedly raised little Yu. He'd spent so much time and effort on her as well. It would be a pity to abandon her, but a heartbreak to lose her. His master had plenty of useful subordinates, but he couldn't find anyone as smart and experienced as little Yu who wouldn't raise suspicions. Helpless, no one could tell whether Chu Tianyin was feeling sad or not. He promptly ordered, "Withdraw everyone and cancel all operations for the time being." He had planted plenty of spies around the Duke of Qin's estate and had been looking into the backgrounds of the servants there, hoping to buy them off. It was better to bribe the Duke of Qin's men than to send in new recruits. But now that news of Su Xiaoyu had spread, he had to withdraw. He still wanted to stay in Tianning's capital city. Although the news of the orphan of Western Qin's imperial clan was lost, his little sister Chu Qingge was still in the palace. She was still Emperor Tianhui's sweetheart. At the very least, he had to help Chu Qingge secure the position of Tianning's empress. The Nether clan's Chu clan had 2 missions on their shoulders. One was to find the imperial bloodline, while the other was to help Western Qin revive the great Qin Empire. As soon as the scout heard the orders, he knew that Su Xiaoyu was beyond saving. Although he felt a little regretful, he didn't dare to defy his master's orders. He obeyed and did as he was told. Within a single night, all of Chu Tianyin's operations in Tianning's capital city had been cancelled. His speed was so fast that Han Yunqi's spies couldn't find him. Esteemed Princess Consort, the people that Imperial bodyguard Chu sent to investigate are all dead. Their movements are even faster than ours. Su Donglin brought back bad news. When Su Xiaoyu had entered the Duke of Qin's estate, Chu Shifeng had sent men to investigate her origins. Who knew that the next time the guards went, they'd found that everyone involved had been killed? Esteemed Princess Consort, could it be that we have alerted the enemy? Bailey Mingxiang asked in a low voice. Although hanging Su Xiaoyu on the tallest tree in the Duke of Qin's mansion was to lure the snake out of its hole, it was also to alert the snake that Su Xiaoyu had been exposed in the Duke of Qin's mansion. From the looks of it, the other party was planning to abandon Su Xiaoyu. If it were me, I would also choose to abandon the pawn. Tianning's capital city is the Duke of Qin's territory. Now that the cat's out of the bag, the other party wouldn't have the guts to continue, Han Yunqi said seriously. Esteemed Princess Consort, then why did you hang Su Xiaoyu so high up in the air? We should seal off the news first. Su Donglin grew anxious, but Bailey Mingxiang only laughed. Esteemed Princess Consort's ulterior motive isn't the wine, but Su Xiaoyu. Han Yunqi liked Bailey Mingxiang more and more. Bailey Mingxiang really was smart and quick-witted. What do you mean by that? Su Donglin asked anxiously. Esteemed Princess Consort is certain that Su Xiaoyu will be abandoned, so she hung Su Xiaoyu so high up in the air to attack Su Xiaoyu. If Esteemed Princess Consort wants to know something, the most direct way is to start with Su Xiaoyu, Bailey Mingxiang explained. Han Yunqi really did mean that. She refused to believe that a child less than 10 years old like Su Xiaoyu could be so strong-willed in the face of death. How loyal could she be when she was abandoned? This girl doesn't seem like she wants to kill someone. Just what does she want to do? Han Yunqi muttered to herself. She still couldn't figure out why Su Xiaoyu had caused the explosion and scalded her on purpose. Judging from the previous situation, Su Xiaoyu more or less knew martial arts. If she wanted to kill her, she had plenty of chances. She could have done it when she scalded her in the study. Why had Su Xiaoyu snuck into the Duke of Qin's estate? She didn't want to kill, but hurt? If it was just scalding her, it didn't seem to have any meaning. Esteemed Princess Consort, who was there when you saved Su Xiaoyu? Bailey Mingxiang asked. Chu Qingge and Mu Ling Han Yunqi had long considered this question. Back then, Chu Qingge had hit Su Xiaoyu. Mu Ling couldn't stand the sight of it and had stepped in to help her. She'd gone to save Su Xiaoyu purely by chance. She hadn't gone to that restaurant on purpose. She remembered that she and Zhao Mama had gone out to buy jewelry that day and happened to pass by that restaurant for a meal. Now that she thought about it, Su Xiaoyu must have been waiting at that restaurant for ages. Even if she and Zhao Mama hadn't gone in that day, Su Xiaoyu would have made a big deal out of it and brought it to the streets so she'd run into her. In that case, had Chu Qingge and Mu Ling been used by someone at that restaurant? Or was one of them Su Xiaoyu's accomplices? Both of them have a grudge against esteemed Princess Consort, right? Bailey Mingxiang asked next. All right. Han Yunqi felt a little embarrassed at Bailey Mingxiang's words. What else does he want? What other medicine does your Highness Duke of Qin want? Do you want to fight another round with this one? Gu Qisha's smile was full of ridicule. Chapter 448. Long Fei Yi remained calm at the mocking look in Gu Qisha's eyes, but Chu Shifeng found the sight to be an eyesore. He raged, Gu Qisha, the winner is king. Put away your laughable face. When His Highness Duke of Qin had come to ask for medicine, he'd tried peaceful means before resorting to force. It was this fellow who didn't know how to appreciate favors and made things difficult for him on purpose. Otherwise, His Highness Duke of Qin wouldn't have hurt him and threatened him directly. The winner is king? I think you're forcing me. Gu Qisha's smile grew even more disdainful. His Highness Duke of Qin is stronger than this one. Chu Qingge couldn't get used to hearing this and retorted, It's good that you know you're weak. There's no need to show off. So you're saying that His Highness Duke of Qin is bullying the weak? Gu Qisha chuckled. So what if he's bullying the weak? Chu Shifeng really wanted to argue with this fellow, but Gu Qisha's strange smile only made him want to piss him off to death. Long Fei Yi saw all of this and felt a faint sense of familiarity. He felt like he'd seen such a cheap mouth somewhere before, but he had no time to dwell on it now because he had something else to do. Long Fei Yi, how can your lordship be sure that this bear Chuan is real? He asked. Leaving aside Gu Qisha, even Chu Shifeng was surprised. Both of them assumed that Long Fei Yi had something important to do, but instead, he asked if the bear Chuan was real. Didn't you already inspect it? What? You're only asking if it's real now that you've accepted it? Gu Qisha asked unhappily. Although Chu Shifeng didn't speak, he didn't understand either. His Highness Duke of Qin had written at least 10 letters to Medicine City's Wanggong before coming here. He'd asked about the bear Chuan, panoptic red lotus, and serpent fruit in detail, as well as how to make the antidote for broomcorn millet poison. Each letter was a dozen or so pages long. Chu Shifeng had read 2 or 3 of them, but couldn't understand why His Highness Duke of Qin was so specific about the antidote. Couldn't he just get it and make it? Even if he didn't make it for esteemed Wang Fei, Old Yao had said that any poison's master could make the antidote as long as the medicine was real. Since His Highness Duke of Qin knows so much, he should be able to tell if the bear Chuan is real or fake. Furthermore, even if Gu Qisha didn't want the medicine Ghost Valley anymore, there was no reason for him to use a fake to trick them even though it hadn't even been a year. This prince does not understand these things, so how would I know if they are true or false? Long Fei Yi said. Hearing this, Chu Shifeng realized something was off. Still, he couldn't figure out what His Highness Duke of Qin was planning, so he could only keep quiet. The bear Chuan that Gu Qisha had taken out was the real deal, so he couldn't bring himself to laugh at being doubted like this. There's only one bear Chuan. If you don't believe me, then forget it. Go find someone else. At this time, Long Fei Yi's lips curled into a mocking smile. What if I don't? Chu Shifeng's mouth twitched at the words. He never expected His Highness Duke of Qin to act so shamelessly. Just what was he planning to do? Long Fei Ye's question left Gu Qisha feeling helpless. Who asked him to be unable to defeat Long Fei Yi? Gu Qisha's eyes flashed with shrewd light as he endured it. Your Highness Duke of Qin, get to the point. Just what else do you want? Your Lordship's serpent fruit and panoptic red lotus are both genuine goods. Together with the bear chuan, these three ingredients can be combined into an antidote. Do you understand? Long Fei Yi asked. That's the antidote for broomcorn millet poison. What? Has your Highness Duke of Qin been poisoned? Since Gu Qisha knew the antidote for broomcorn millet poison, he should have known as soon as Long Fei Yi asked for the ingredients. Why did he have to ask? It was obvious he'd brought it up on purpose. Still, Long Fei Yi was very satisfied with this answer. If Gu Qisha knew the antidote, it'd save him a lot of time and effort. Since you know the antidote, why don't you make the antidote to verify the authenticity of the bear chuan? Long Fei Yi said. A complicated look flickered past Gu Qisha's eyes, but he didn't speak. According to your lordship's understanding, if the antidote is fake, then there's no way to combine it with the other two ingredients, Long Fei Yi said seriously. Gu Qisha laughed coldly to himself. Since you know so much, why can't you tell if the bear chuan is real? On the sidelines, Chu Shifeng finally figured out what His Highness Duke of Qin was planning. His Highness's circling around in circles. It really takes a lot of thought. Last time, His Highness Duke of Qin and esteemed Wang Fei had come to Medicine Ghost Valley to ask for antidotes to save Bailey Mingxiang. Esteemed Wang Fei found out that His Highness Duke of Qin had come to Medicine Ghost Valley to ask for the three ingredients. Now that he'd found all three ingredients, how was he supposed to keep hiding the truth from esteemed Wang Fei? If he told Gu Qisha to shut up now, it'd only be a coincidence. Gu Qisha would find out that His Highness Duke of Qin was hiding the truth from esteemed Wang Fei. If things didn't go well, Gu Qisha might even tell esteemed Wang Fei about it. However, Gu Qisha wouldn't have a handle on His Highness if he used the bear chuan as an excuse to make the antidote. Moreover, His Highness only needed to take a small portion of the antidote for Mute Granny. The rest could be taken back to the Duke of Qin's estate and explained to esteemed Wang Fei as well. Serpent fruit, panoptic red lotus, and bear chuan all had different sizes of antidote. Esteemed Wang Fei had never seen the bear chuan before, so she had no idea how much antidote it was. Chu Shifeng finally understood why His Highness Duke of Qin had asked Medicine City's Wang Gong for so much information about the antidote. As it turned out, he'd been thinking of ways to keep hiding the truth so esteemed Wang Fei wouldn't get suspicious. How much thought must he have put into coming up with such a plan and excuse? As expected, one needed to come up with more lies just to cover up one lie. With His Highness Duke of Qin's power and influence, why would he waste so much effort trying to cover up a lie? No matter what he did or said, when did he ever need to explain himself to anyone? When Han Yunshi had asked him questions in the past, His Highness hadn't even bothered to explain himself, much less answer them. Now even the heavens had changed. Long Fei Yi and Chu Shifeng were both waiting for Gu Qisha's reply. Chu Shifeng mused that Gu Qisha was a shrewd man, but he'd never guess His Highness Duke of Qin's intentions. After all, he had no idea what was going on between His Highness and esteemed Wang Fei, much less Mute Granny. Gu Qisha's eyes darted around in their sockets. Heaven knows what he was thinking. Still, he quickly agreed. Hee, then I'll have to ask your Highness Duke of Qin to take out all three ingredients. I'll make the antidote right here and now. The three of them arrived at the medicine hall before Long Fei Yi took out all three ingredients. Gu Qisha began to make the antidote right in front of them. His skinny, bony hands moved quickly and smoothly as he weighed, sliced, crushed, ground, and mixed the ingredients together. His movements were as fluid as flowing water. With Gu Qisha's black robes concealing his movements, it was easy to miss him if he wasn't careful. Long Fei Yi and Chu Shifeng both watched closely. Soon enough, the antidote for broomcorn millet poison was complete. Gu Qisha presented the antidote to Long Fei Yi with a cold smile. Your Highness Duke of Qin, take a look and see if this is real or fake. If you take it out of Medicine Ghost Valley, this one won't recognize it. Long Fei Yi glanced at the antidote before personally pouring the powder into a porcelain bottle. Without a word, he turned to leave. This was his personality. If there was nothing important, he wouldn't waste words. Although he didn't need to see him off, Guqi Sha still walked him all the way out of the valley. Your Highness Duke of Qin, may we meet again someday. Long Fei didn't even look back. He'd gone in such a big circle today that he could finally give Han Yunqi an excuse. Once he cured Mute Granny's poison and figured out what was going on with Lady Tianqin, he'd bring the antidote back to Han Yunqi. He hadn't been away from that woman for so long, ever since he came back from the disaster areas. He figured it'd take at most 5 days before he could go back. That woman probably wouldn't be so docile as to stay at home and recuperate. She'd probably be running out every day. Guqi Sha stood on top of the mountain and watched Long Fei Ye's figure disappear into the forest. Then he took out a bottle of antidote from his sleeve. He was a genius at making medicine. Forget about Long Fei Yi. Even the 3 clan heads of Medicine City wouldn't be able to tell what he'd done just then. Only half of the antidote he'd given Long Fei Yi was real. The other half was a bunch of powders with no medicinal properties whatsoever. The bottle in his hand was the other half of the antidote. He couldn't say that the antidote he'd given Long Fei Yi was fake, either, but the amount was fake. Long Fei Yi and Chu Shifeng wouldn't be able to tell. Even if they'd had someone check carefully, they'd have to be a top expert to figure it out. Still, Guqi Sha was 100% certain that Han Yunqi would be able to tell. Your Highness Duke of Qin, we'll meet again someday. Guqi Sha was in a very good mood as he muttered to himself, almost humming a tune. As soon as he returned to his courtyard, he told the old steward, "There's no need to send that secret letter. Things are more interesting than this old man thought." The old steward had no idea what Guqi Sha was talking about. He wanted to destroy the letter, but couldn't bring himself to do it. His Highness Duke of Qin had come again and again, but his master had secretly sent a secret letter to Qin Wangfei. He was curious as to what was written inside. After some hesitation, the old steward secretly opened the letter and read its contents. He grew even more confused. His master had only told esteemed Wangfei that his Highness Duke of Qin had come for the bear chuan. That's it? I thought there was something going on. The old steward muttered to himself. By the time he returned to his courtyard, Guqi Sha had already disappeared. 2 days later, Long Fei Yi and Chu Shifeng arrived at Tianning's capital city on horseback. They passed by the Duke of Qin's estate without stopping, but headed straight for the solitary enclosure. Mute Granny had been locked up here ever since she'd returned from South Ning Prefecture, not the hidden pavilion. Tang Li was thrilled to see Long Fei Yi return. "You got it?" Long Fei Yi didn't reply, but entered the study and opened a secret chamber. They walked through a small maze before arriving at Mute Granny's secret room. Even Tang Li and Chu Shifeng couldn't enter. They exchanged helpless glances. "I'm so looking forward to it." Tang Li couldn't help but sigh with emotion. He'd watched over Mute Granny for so long, but he still didn't know who she was or what secret she held. "I'm so nervous." Chu Shifeng kept fidgeting with his fingers. He only hoped that Mute Granny's secrets and esteemed Wang Fei's identity wouldn't embarrass His Highness too much. Long Fei Yi opened the door to the secret room and saw Mute Granny sitting at the table drinking tea. Compared to her previous outburst, she was much calmer now. Still, Mute Granny grew agitated at the sight of Long Fei Yi. This young man had a portrait of Mu Xian and her daughter in his hands, but he'd imprisoned her. Just what did he want to do? Long Fei Yi galloped past the house without entering, but this place was much calmer. He sat down by the table and brewed a new pot of tea. Just like before, he tapped the table lightly to signal Mute Granny to sit down. Chapter 449. Mute Granny had lived for more than half of her life. She had experienced many ups and downs in the Mu clan. She could tell that this young man had an extraordinary temperament and was definitely not from an ordinary background. She had been knocked unconscious in the Mu family, so she didn't know what had happened that night. She didn't know why Mu Xian's portrait was in this young man's hands, or what relationship this young man had with Mu Xian's daughter. However, she could feel that at least he didn't have any ill intentions. Kidnapping and imprisoning her was only to dig out Mu Xian's secret from her. She was deaf and mute. Her knowledge of words was limited. After imprisoning her for so long, this young man was probably at his wit's end. What was this young man doing here today? Mute Granny calmly sat down in front of Long Fei Yi. Just like in South Ning Prefecture, Long Fei Yi politely poured a cup of tea and pushed it in front of Mute Granny. Long Fei Yi had never been so courteous, not even to elders like Aunt Ru or Tang Zijin. Mute Granny nodded as a sign of thanks. She took the cup and sipped it gently. She did not notice any difference in the taste. Long Fei Yi watched silently as Mute Granny drank the entire cup of tea. There was not the slightest ripple of emotion in his deep eyes. He had guarded this secret for so long, pondering the truth day and night. Now that the truth was on the verge of being revealed, he was unusually calm. Perhaps there were many things that he already had a conclusion in his heart, and he had already made a decision. Knowing the truth was only to strengthen the decision he had made back then. Mute Granny put down the cup. Her expression changed. Her throat felt like it was on fire. It was scorching. She clutched her throat and stared at Long Fei Yi with wide eyes. She thought that Long Fei Yi had poisoned her. She opened her mouth. She wanted to speak. She wanted to shout, but she could not make a sound. She hurriedly snatched the cup of tea. She wanted to drink a few mouthfuls to ease the burning sensation. However, just as she was about to take a sip, she stopped. If this tea was poisoned, she would be in even more pain. The poison in her had been tormenting her throat and ears day and night. It had always been there, causing her to endure the pain every day. However, the pain was nothing compared to the burning sensation she was experiencing. It was too painful. Mute Granny angrily pointed at Long Fei Yi. If she could speak, she would definitely be cursing him. She kept opening her mouth as if she really wanted to say something, but in the end, she couldn't make a sound. In the face of Mute Granny's fury, Long Fei Yi remained unmoved. He continued to sip his tea. This scene made Mute Granny even angrier. She suddenly rushed over and roared, "Who are you? Why are you torturing me like this?" As soon as he said that, Mute Granny was stunned. She hurriedly covered her mouth, her face full of shock. God, did she just shout out loud? Her throat suddenly stopped hurting. Just as Mute Granny was in disbelief, a searing pain shot through her ears. This time, however, Mute Granny didn't explode. Instead, she looked at Long Fei Yi in confusion, hoping for an answer. Long Fei Yi was still drinking tea. After 3 cups of tea, he finally spoke. He was very straightforward. "Madame Wu Xian is your master, right?" Mute Granny was even more shocked. She actually heard it. For more than 20 years, she had lived in a world of dead silence, unable to hear a single sound. Now, she suddenly heard a human voice. It was a familiar yet unfamiliar feeling. For a moment, she couldn't get used to it. She didn't hear what Long Fei Yi said clearly. Without a doubt, Long Fei Yi had put the antidote to the broomcorn millet poison in her tea. The broomcorn millet poison was cured. When Mute Granny realized this, she quickly returned to her seat. She lowered her head and remained silent for a long time. She needed to adjust her emotions. After a while, she turned to Long Fei Yi and said, "Young man, you are very capable. You actually managed to cure my poison." Long Fei Yi pushed another cup of tea over and said the same thing. "Madame Wu Xian is your master, right?" This time, Mute Granny heard him clearly. "First, tell me who you are." Mute Granny was very calm. Long Fei Yi took out a portrait of Han Yunxi, the very same one he'd drawn back when he'd wanted her dead. Even Chu Shifeng had no idea that he'd drawn the portrait himself. Mute Granny grew excited at the sight of the portrait. "I'm sure you know that the girl in the portrait is Mu Xian's daughter. Her name is Han Yunxi," Long Fei Yi said. "Han Yunxi? That girl's called Han Yunxi?" Yunxi. Yunxi. Mute Granny was both surprised and delighted. When she saw the girl in the Mu Estate's bamboo house and saw the Xian character on her bag, she knew she was Mu Xian's daughter. Back then, Miss Mu Xian had said that she wanted a daughter in the future and would teach her the art of medicine. She even wanted to embroider a bag for her as a dowry. She never expected the young miss to actually give birth to a daughter who was already so old. "And who are you?" Mute Granny asked cautiously. Long Fei Yi didn't hesitate to give her an answer. "Your lordship is Han Yunxi's husband, Tiannings's Duke of Qin. A husband was a position that every man had. It was also a man's responsibility. Although he'd held the title for a long time, Long Fei felt an indescribable sensation in his heart as he smiled faintly. Mute Granny had been imprisoned in the Mu estate for years, so she had no idea of Tiannings's Duke of Qin's power. She was very surprised. Then why are you keeping me here behind her back? Although she wasn't clear on the situation, she was certain that Han Yunqi didn't know she'd been imprisoned. There are some things that she'll never know. She'll. Long Fei fell silent for a long time without saying anything else. How is it? Mute Granny pressed. Long Fei remained silent. Just what do you want to do? The more Mute Granny thought about it, the more timid she felt. This fellow was the young Miss's husband. If he had any ill intentions, what would happen to the young miss? There are some things that she'll never know. She'll be happy. Long Fei finally finished his sentence. Happy? This was the first time he'd said that word in his life. Actually, he didn't really understand the meaning of the word. He'd never thought that the word would exist in his dictionary. He only knew that the word happiness should be the ultimate pursuit for a woman. Compared to happiness, Long Fei knew even less about women. He didn't know when it started, but he'd always wanted to treat that woman well. Unfortunately, he didn't know how. Ever since he was young, he'd never treated anyone well, much less understood or liked any woman. His purest thoughts were that if he liked her, he'd make her happy. Long Fei's words were heavy, but there was a faint smile on his cold lips. It was this smile that dispelled the innate cold aura on his body. When Mute Granny saw that, she relaxed her guard. She didn't know what was going on, but her eyes had seen far too much love and hate. She could see the smile on the young man's face. What was happiness? In this world, there was a person who would make you smile when you thought of her. That was happiness. There are some things that she doesn't know. Could it be that you do? Mute Granny asked seriously. If I'm not mistaken, Madame Mu Exine has the blood of Western Qin's imperial family flowing through her veins. Long Fei hit the nail on the head. Mute Granny's heart skipped a beat. She looked at Long Fei, not knowing what to say. She knew all of Mu Exine's secrets, and the most confidential one, which even Mu Yingdong didn't know, was Mu Exine's background. How did you know? Mute Granny knew that there was no point in denying it now. It seems that this prince's guess was correct. Long Fei grew serious. From the first night Han Yunqi entered the Duke of Qin's manor, he had begun investigating Han Yunqi. On the wedding night, the woman's poison skills and calmness surprised him. He didn't believe that the trash of the Han family's daughter would have such skills. At first, he suspected that Han Yunqi was a spy, and that she was in cahoots with the spies from Northernly. But later, he gradually realized that the woman was very simple. She didn't even have a friend, much less an accomplice. She didn't have any relationship with the spies from Northernly, but she had personally uncovered them. She carried the identity of Qin Wangfei and didn't enjoy any glory. Instead, she was hated by everyone and got herself into trouble, but she was able to deal with it all on her own. At first, he just watched silently. But gradually, he couldn't help but make an exception and speak up for her. She said that she learned her poison skills from the books left behind by Lady Tianxin, but he was skeptical. He began to secretly interrogate Han Kongan and investigate Lady Tianxin. Only then did he find out that Han Yunqi wasn't Han Kongan's biological daughter, but Lady Tianxin's and someone else's. He investigated all the way to the Mu family in Medicine City and found out that Lady Tianxin was having an affair with the remnants of the poison pet. For a long time, his suspicions about Han Yunqi's origins were inseparable from the two words, poison sect. If the white-robed man from the Shadow Clan hadn't appeared, he would never have thought that the woman he had made an exception to keep by his side was related to the Western Qin imperial family. Forget about others, even the orphans of the 7 noble families wouldn't have thought that the Western Qin imperial family had an orphan. Back then, the last of the Western Qin imperial family's bloodline had been publicly shot by the Nether Clan. The Shadow Clan was one of the 7 noble families. They were the most loyal and responsible guards of the Western Qin imperial family. The Shadow Clan's protection was with their lives. They had never failed to fulfill their duties, much less betrayed them. When the Western Qin imperial family was destroyed, the entire Shadow Clan had been buried with them. But now, a descendant of the Shadow Clan had appeared. Without a doubt, this proved that the Western Qin imperial family had an orphan. That white-robed man's protection of Han Yunqi was hard to ignore. No one could say for sure whether the Shadow Clan member had appeared to search for his master, or whether he had appeared because of the poison beast. Long Fei didn't have a definite answer either, which was why he'd asked Mute Granny today. But Mute Granny's reaction gave him a definite answer. Han Yunqi was the orphan of the Western Qin imperial family. Without a doubt, Mute Granny was furious at Long Fei's probing method, but she couldn't deny it. "How on earth did you guess?" she asked angrily. "Because the Shadow Clan came looking for her," Long Fei said calmly. Unexpectedly, Mute Granny was very agitated. "The Shadow Clan? What do they want?" Chapter 450. Long Fei never thought that the words Shadow Clan would make Mute Granny so agitated. Her expression wasn't one of excitement, but one of anxiety. The Shadow Clan should be the clan that the Western Qin imperial orphan trusted the most. What do they want to do? Have they confirmed Yunqi's identity? Mute Granny asked anxiously. "So what if they've confirmed it?" Long Fei retorted. But Mute Granny only grew angry. "No matter who it is, even if they're from the Shadow Clan, don't even think about using Yunqi's identity to make a fuss." Long Fei immediately understood. There were too many things that could be done about the identity of Western Qin's imperial heir. Once her identity was made public, even the 7 noble families and others with ulterior motives would use Han Yunqi as an excuse to summon past powers to fight for power in the world, much less the 7 noble families. Most of these people weren't truly loyal to Western Qin's imperial clan, nor were they truly aiming to revive Western Qin. Instead, they were filled with wild ambitions. They used the excuse of assisting the imperial heir as an excuse to hold the Son of Heaven and order his vassals around. To put it bluntly, they were using the imperial heir as a stepping stone. Once they achieved their goals, there would be no need for the imperial clan to exist anymore. Once Han Yunqi's identity was made public, there would be no peace for the rest of her life. The Shadow Clan hasn't made a move yet. They've refused to admit it either. Perhaps they haven't confirmed Yunqi's identity yet, Long Fei said. It was Han Yunqi's honesty that allowed him to understand the Shadow Clan's movements. If the Shadow Clan was certain that Han Yunqi was Western Qin's imperial heir, why hadn't they made any moves? Why would they only show up once every few months without telling Han Yunqi anything? At the very least, the Shadow Clan would recognize a master. But the white-robed gentleman hadn't. Mute Granny finally relaxed a little, but she quickly asked, "Duke of Qin, what about you? Why did you marry Yunqi?" Long Fei's lips rose into a cold smile. "You suspect your lordship? You're Tianning's Qin Wang. If you really want to, Yunqi's status is the best way for you to seize the throne." Mute Granny gave a cold snort. Long Fei snorted disdainfully. "A trifling Tianning's throne doesn't need your lordship to step on a woman's back to fight for it. This prince would rather she not be an orphan of the imperial family. I would rather she be the first daughter of the Han family." In truth, Mute Granny's worries were exactly what Long Fei did not want to see. Bearing the identity of a member of the royal family, shouldering the mission of the family, shouldering the expectations of countless people, living their entire lives for one great cause. Everything they did had to be judged by others. For the orphans of the royal family, this was both an honor and a restraint. At the very least, in Long Fei's eyes, this was a restriction. Mute Granny didn't believe him. She sneered. "Why should I believe you?" Mute Granny's smile was very cold, but Long Fei's smile was even colder. He rose to his feet and walked to Mute Granny's side before gracefully bending over to whisper in her ear. "Because your lordship is..." Long Fei's last words were spoken very quietly, but Mute Granny heard them clearly. Her face turned white at the last few words, as if she'd been frightened to death. Her entire body froze in shock. How could this be? Yunqi's husband was actually... That reason should be enough to convince you, right? Long Fei asked coldly. After a while, Long Fei had already returned to his seat, but Mute Granny was still unable to speak. You, East Qin Imperial family. How was Mute Granny supposed to face this reality? The last orphan of Western Qin's imperial family, Han Yunqi's husband, was actually the East Qin Imperial family's orphan, the East Qin Imperial Prince. Was all of this an ill-fated relationship, a coincidence, or intentional? Mute Granny was suddenly on guard. She rose to her feet and backed away. Fine. So you're planning to hide this from Yunqi and not let her know about her origins so you can use her. You want to use her to revive your East Qin. Suddenly, there was a loud slap as Long Fei Yi slammed the table. He was never good at explaining himself, nor did he like explaining himself to anyone. But he'd already wasted quite a few words today, so he never expected Mute Granny to look at him like this. To him, this was simply an insult. He rose to his feet, his voice as cold as ice. Your lordship isn't so low as to step on a woman to ascend to the throne. I'm not so low as to use a woman to revive my country. Mute Granny was stunned by Long Fei Ye's anger. She stood rooted to the spot before asking, "Then why did you imprison this old woman here? And why did you hide this from Yunqi?" Long Fei Yi didn't answer, but drank his tea in silence. After a long time, he finally spoke. "I want her to be the Han family's first wife's daughter for the rest of her life. She'll have no hatred or guilt and stay peacefully by your lordship's side." Mute Granny's heart skipped a beat. She finally understood what this young man meant when he said, "She'll be happy." If Yunqi found out about her heavy origins, how much burden would she feel in her heart? If Yunqi found out about the Duke of Qin's origins, what would she do? Mute Granny fell silent as well. After a long time, she finally asked, "Duke of Qin, does Yunqi like you?" Long Fei Yi smiled. It was a faint smile, but his eyes were filled with bitterness and helplessness. Did Han Yunqi like him? That woman still looked at him with infatuation even now. Long Fei Ye's smile gave Mute Granny the answer. Finally, Mute Granny sat back down and asked for a cup of tea from Long Fei Yi before telling him Mu Xian's story. The last surviving member of Western Qin's imperial clan wasn't the baby boy killed by the Nether clan, but Mu Xian's mother, Yunqi's grandmother. Back then, Western Qin's emperor and various princes had died on the battlefield. Noble Consort Qin gave birth to a baby girl before giving birth. She didn't understand the situation and believed that Western Qin wouldn't be destroyed so easily. As long as she gave birth to a boy, she'd rise in status and become the Empress Dowager. Thus, Noble Consort Qin sent the baby girl away and adopted a boy instead. But a few months later, rebels broke into the imperial palace and destroyed Western Qin along with its imperial clan. Back then, only the Shadow Clan knew about this and secretly sent people to protect the baby girl. When Western Qin's imperial clan was invaded, East Qin and the other noble clans tried to exterminate them all. They hunted down every last member of the imperial clan and didn't even spare the baby. The Shadow Clan told the Nether Clan about this, and the Nether Clan's general pretended to betray them by killing the baby boy himself. Only then did they stop pursuing and killing the baby girl. Later on, East Qin was destroyed and the 7 noble clans declined. The once glorious Great Qin Empire became a dusty piece of history. The entire Shadow Clan sacrificed themselves for the empire, leaving only one person to protect the baby girl. But when the baby girl grew up and learned of her origins, she suddenly ran away and disappeared. So that baby girl was Mu Xian's mother. She married into the Mu clan and gave birth to Mu Xian, Long Fei Yi said. Exactly. She escaped the control of the Shadow and Nether clans and married into the Mu clan as a concubine. She only gave birth to one daughter, Mu Xian. Mute Granny sighed as she spoke. This old woman was Mu Xian's wet nurse. If Mu Xian hadn't told me all this, I would never have dreamed of such things. Who is Han Yunqi's father? What does he have to do with the poison sect? Long Fei Yi asked. The rumors of Mu Xian having an affair with the remnants of the poison sect are true, Mute Granny said. Miss Mu Xian was originally sent to Medical City to study medicine, but she never expected to run into someone from the poison sect. She fell in love with him and couldn't extricate herself. She never returned to the Mu clan after going to Medical City. She secretly exchanged a few letters with this old woman, and the last one told me a piece of news that was mixed with both joy and sorrow. She was pregnant? Long Fei guessed. Mute Granny smiled wryly and nodded. She was pregnant, but she ran into that beast from the poison sect having an affair with another woman behind her back. Hearing this, Long Fei finally understood. That was why Mu Xin, or Lady Tianxin, had left the poison sect in despair and changed her name to hide in Tianning's capital city, where she married Han Kongan. Thus, Han Yunqi's mother was an orphan of Western Qin's imperial clan, while her father was a member of the poison sect. That was the last letter this old woman received. Later on, Mu Yingdong discovered all of my correspondence with Miss Mu Xin. By then, there were already rumors in Medical City that Mu Xin was having an affair with the poison sect. For the sake of protecting the Mu clan's reputation and maintaining the relationship between the Mu clan and Medical City, Mu Yingdong vehemently denied the rumors. As Mute Granny spoke, she sighed with emotion. He drugged this old servant until I was deaf and mute. He had me guard the bamboo hut because he wanted to use me to lure out Miss Mu Xin. He even wanted to use Miss Mu Xin as bait to lure out the poison sect and curry favor with those old men in the medical academy. Who would have thought? Who would have thought that Miss Mu Xin wouldn't come, but her daughter would? Does Mu Yingdong know about the Western Qin Imperial clan? Long Fei was most concerned about this question. Mute Granny immediately shook her head. No, he definitely doesn't know. His thoughts are all on the poison sect. Long Fei's heart finally relaxed. If Mu Yingdong didn't know about this matter, then he could save himself a lot of trouble. Duke of Qin, Miss Mu Xin? Actually, Mute Granny had wanted to ask this question from the start, but she didn't dare. She was afraid that the answer would be too much for her to bear. Mu Yingdong had used her as bait, but she hadn't been willing to leave the bamboo hut. She dearly wanted to see her miss one more time and tell her personally about Mu Yingdong's evil intentions. Long Fei naturally knew what Mute Granny wanted to ask. He told her everything about how Mu Xin had changed her name to Tianxin and married into the Han family, including how Lady Tianxin had saved Empress Dowager Li and how the latter had bestowed the marriage. It's a pity that Lady Tianxin died in childbirth. Fortunately, Han Yunqi was saved. Long Fei rarely sighed in front of others. Although Mute Granny had long known that Miss Mu Xin had met with misfortune, she still couldn't take the news. Tears filled her eyes. Difficult childbirth. How could this? What could be more sorrowful than dying in childbirth? Using one life to welcome a new life, leaving the new life without a mother the moment it was born. Mute Granny's eyes reddened. Soon enough, she couldn't take it anymore and covered her mouth to sob. Miss, this old servant has been waiting for you this entire time. With that, Long Fei finally figured out the truth. After Mute Granny calmed down, Long Fei asked, Do you know how many people are left in the poison sect? Who is Yunqi's father? Mute Granny shook her head. Miss Mu Xin has never mentioned him, but she might not tell us such a secret because even the Mu clan doesn't know about it. Long Fei nodded. His slender fingers lightly tapped the table as he pondered over something. Chapter 451. Long Fei's black eyes were as deep as the sea. Even someone as experienced as Mute Granny couldn't tell what he was thinking right now. Mute Granny had already told him everything she knew. When she thought about the identity of this young man in front of her, Mute Granny still couldn't believe it. She couldn't help but ask, Duke of Qin, back then, didn't the East Qin Imperial clan? If Mute Granny remembered correctly, Miss Mu Xin had told her that the East Qin Imperial clan's fate was even more tragic than Western Qin's. The Imperial city had been captured, and the Imperial palace set on fire for half a month. Not a single member of the Imperial clan had survived. Long Fei looked up, his cold eyes flashing with ruthless hatred. Mute Granny's heart skipped a beat, and she didn't know what to say. The grudges between the East and Western Qin Imperial clans had lasted for 3 years. It wasn't something that could be explained in a few words, so Mute Granny probably didn't know the whole story. Still, she knew that the enmity between the two imperial clans was something that couldn't be ignored. Although she feared this man, Mute Granny still spoke directly. Duke of Qin, people's hearts change. History will never change, and the history that carries hatred will never change. Mute Granny had always been a cautious person, but for some reason, she blurted out the entire truth just then. Perhaps it was because of the Duke of Qin's declaration that he wanted her to be the Han clan's legitimate daughter for the rest of her life, without hatred or guilt, and to stay by his lordship's side peacefully. Mu Xian's mother and Miss Mu Xian had thought the same thing in the past. They only wanted to be ordinary women. They didn't have such wild ambitions, nor did they care about national enmity or family hatred. Every man was responsible for the rise and fall of the world, and their family's mission was more important than anything else. But they were only women. Their greatest wish was for the world to be peaceful and harmonious. Mute Granny remembered that Miss Mu Xian had once said that she wanted the Imperial clan's secret to end with her. She hoped that her child wouldn't have to bear the burden of hatred and responsibility. Mute Granny believed her own eyes. She believed that this young man's words were all true, and that his feelings for Yunqi were true as well. But people's hearts could change, to say nothing of a heart filled with hatred. Long Feiyi immediately understood Mute Granny's words. There was indeed hatred in his heart. Since he was young, everyone had tirelessly told him how treacherous, cruel, and cunning the Western Qin royal family was, how they went back on their words. They told him how many defenseless people were burned to death in the East Qin Palace fire, how many innocent women and children. They told him how much his grandfather and father had paid to restore the empire. There was also his mother's death. Many years had passed, but he would never forget the scene of his mother committing suicide. Ever since he was young, there had been hatred in his heart, but what was heavier than hatred was the responsibility on his shoulders. Aunt Ru had said that he was not only shouldering the great cause of recovering the country, but also the lives of his parents and ancestors. They had not sacrificed their lives in vain. No one knew how much torment he had endured since the appearance of the Shadow Clan, especially when Tang Li had earnestly advised him and Aunt Ru had scolded him. Long Feiyi was still silent, and this silence made Mute Granny very worried. Young man, this old woman was right, wasn't she? You. Before Mute Granny could finish, Long Feiyi spoke up. His voice was cold and indifferent, neither fast nor slow. There was not a trace of emotion in it, but the words that came out of his mouth gave Mute Granny a start. He said indifferently, Bin Wang wanted to kill her, but she's gone missing. After searching all over the world to find her, I was afraid of losing her again. Would Han Yunqi cry if she heard these words? As far as she could remember, Long Fei had been especially angry when she'd run away. She would never know that this man's true fear was hidden behind his anger. In her heart, Her Highness would never be afraid of anything. Some people repeatedly emphasized their words and even swore venomous oaths that no one would believe. Others, on the other hand, simply said a few words that weighed as much as a mountain. No one could doubt them. Without a doubt, Long Feiyi belonged to the latter group. But Mute Granny was still worried. Duke of Qin, your heart is big enough to accept Yunqi. But what about your clansmen? What about the East Qin loyalists? Mute Granny asked seriously. They'll never know, Long Feiyi said. Hiding the truth forever was the best choice. If he couldn't, he didn't mind getting rid of those who got in the way. In his eyes, there was no such thing as a bad soldier who didn't want to be a general. Those who disobeyed their masters were useless. Long Feiyi was more worried about the outsiders. You're certain that Mu Yingdong doesn't know about Western Qin? Long Feiyi asked again. This old woman can risk my life for this, but he definitely doesn't know. Mu Yingdong's heart is completely focused on the poison sect. He wants to use this chance to gain Medical City support and secure his position as Medicine City's #1. Mute Granny had a good understanding of Mu Yingdong. Then it can only be that Shadow Clan fellow. Long Feiyi's eyes flashed with killing intent. Without a doubt, he'd long wanted to kill the man. How did the Shadow Clan suspect Yunqi? Mute Granny asked anxiously. After Yunqi's grandmother escaped from the Shadow Clan and Nether Clan, there had been no news of them since. This was the question Long Feiyi was puzzled over as well. Actually, the white-robed man from the Shadow Clan still hadn't given a definite answer. Han Yunqi was the orphan of Western Qin's Imperial Clan, but Long Feiyi would rather kill the wrong person than kill the wrong person. Considering the relationship between the Shadow Clan and Nether Clan, Once the Shadow Clan confirmed Han Yunqi's identity, the Nether Clan would quickly come knocking on their doors. This was also the reason why Long Fei had spent the past 6 months studying the 7 noble families and tracking down their descendants. There's also that black-robed man who kidnapped you last time. Long Fei intoned. Long Fei was still investigating how that black-robed man with a special constitution and mysterious origins had found out about Mute Granny's imprisonment at the hidden pavilion and how much he knew about the old woman. But since Mute Granny had been hiding the truth about Western Qin all this time, the man who'd come after her had to be after Mu Xian and the remnants of the poison sect. The hidden pavilion had set up an inescapable net in anticipation of the black-robed man's next visit. It wasn't easy to hide the truth. Fortunately, not many people knew, Mute Granny sighed. If not for the Shadow Clan's appearance and the Duke of Qin's probing just then, the truth would have died along with Miss Mu Xian and rotted away in her servant's stomach. Long Fei nodded and drank a cup of tea before looking up. Granny, you're the one who knows the most. When she recalled the killing intent in the Duke of Qin's eyes and heard his words, Mute Granny's heart gave a lurch as she lowered her head. The Duke of Qin wasn't wrong. She was the one who knew the truth best. Yunqi, I've been looking for you this entire time. Long Fei said next. Mute Granny didn't say a word. Long Fei said simply, Your lordship already told Yunqi that you fell off a cliff and died. Tomorrow, I'll send someone to escort you out of closed-door cultivation and head west. Don't ever come back. Mute Granny only nodded silently. Long Fei rose to his feet. The boulder weighing on his heart finally lifted. Now that he knew the truth and confirmed his suspicions, he'd be even more decisive in his actions. Granny, we'll never meet again. Long Fei poured Mute Granny a cup of tea before leaving. He still had to return to the estate and give the rest of the antidote to Han Yunqi. It had been days since he'd seen her, so he didn't know what that woman was up to. Long Fei had already left the secret chamber and was about to close the stone door behind him when Mute Granny finally spoke up. She knew there was no point in asking, but she couldn't help herself. She asked, Duke of Qin, will there be a day when East Qin is revived? Yunqi was the only member of Western Qin's imperial clan left in this world, but Yunqi knew nothing about it. As a servant, she should at least ask on behalf of Western Qin's imperial clan. Your Highness Duke of Qin, if the day comes when East Qin is revived, could you show mercy for Yunqi's sake? Western Qin's imperial clan was gone for good, but the loyal descendants of the nobles and aristocratic families who'd sworn loyalty to them to the death still existed. The remnants of the palace and the history of East Qin still existed. Once East Qin was revived, they'd definitely seek revenge. Long Fei wasn't planning to reply, but he stopped after taking 2 steps. With a disdainful snort, he said, Your lordship isn't thinking of reviving the country. Your lordship wants to expand the world and create a new imperial clan. Mute Granny's heart skipped a beat at his words. She froze in place until the stone door to the secret chamber slowly closed behind her. She could tell that the Duke of Qin was no ordinary person. He had great ambitions and the domineering determination in his eyes, but she never expected him to create a new imperial clan. He'd surpassed the narrowness of national enmity and cast aside the burden of reviving the country. This was a true man, a true expert. It was impossible to imagine how big the Duke of Qin's heart was, or how much confidence he had to have such lofty ambitions despite all his burdens. Mute Granny was thoroughly convinced. She actually rejoiced that Yunqi was lucky to have met such a man. If Miss Mu Xian knew about this in the underworld, she'd definitely be gratified. Mute Granny picked up the cup of tea Long Fei had poured for her before he left and drank it in reverence. Then she took off her outer robes and tied them to the beam. She was a servant who'd waited for her master for so many years, but she still couldn't see him. What was the use of her knowing so much about the truth? What was the point of leaving closed-door cultivation and drifting so far away from home? With her neck hanging off the beam and her feet on the stool, Mute Granny muttered to herself, Yunqi, Granny hopes that you'll never know the taste of hatred. I hope that you'll never hold any grudges against the Duke of Qin. I hope that you'll one day ascend the throne of Empress and glorify yourself. She gently stroked the portrait of Mu Xian, She kept close to her clothes before closing her eyes and kicking aside the stool by her feet. Then she hung herself from the beam to commit suicide. By the time Tangli arrived, Mute Granny was already dead. Tangli and Chu Shifeng had been waiting outside the entire time, so they had no idea what the Duke of Qin and Mute Granny had been talking to each other. He quickly picked up Mute Granny and saw that there was no way to save her, so he sent someone to report to Long Fei Yi. By now, Long Fei Yi had already arrived at the gates of the Duke of Qin's estate. Long Fei Yi was very calm after hearing the news. He simply instructed, "Have Tangli bury her in secret. Keep watch over the hidden pavilion." A fake Mute Granny had been imprisoned there this entire time, waiting for the black-robed man to show himself. It was already late at night, but Long Fei Yi didn't disturb anyone. As soon as he reached the hibiscus courtyard, he headed straight for the leisurely cloud pavilion. Ah! Han Yunqi immediately screamed. It hurt. It hurt more than rubbing salt on her wound. It hurt so much that she felt unwell. Bailey Mingxiang was shocked and hurriedly tried to salvage the situation. "Esteemed Wang Fei, I'm sorry. Mingxiang didn't do it on purpose." Long Fei Yi was very surprised. He didn't expect to see such a scene. What happened to Han Yunqi's back? He strode forward and took a closer look. Only then did he see the miserable state of Han Yunqi's back. He was stunned at first, then angrily asked, "What happened?" His voice was terrifyingly cold. Bailey Mingxiang's heart and hands trembled, but Han Yunqi was already used to it. She took a few deep breaths to relieve the pain before replying, "Your Highness still doesn't know about Su Xiaoyu's matter?" Su Xiaoyu? Long Fei Yi was confused. He stared at Han Yunqi's wound. The more he looked, the more it hurt his eyes. When he saw Bailey Mingxiang's trembling hands applying medicine, he became impatient and angrily said, "Get lost." Bailey Mingxiang's head was almost buried in her heart. She said that she would let go of her heart and face it calmly, but when she faced this man, she still couldn't maintain her usual calm and composure. A trace of bitterness uncontrollably crept into her heart. She silently got up and retreated to the side to wait. "Su Xiaoyu is..." Han Yunqi looked back and was about to explain when Long Fei said sternly, "You shut up for your lordship and lie down properly." Han Yunqi was frightened. She silently lowered her head and didn't dare to move. Long Fei carefully examined her wound. He could tell at a glance that it was a burn. Moreover, it had been a few days and hadn't healed. Damn it, Tangli didn't report such an important matter to him. Did that guy want to scram back to the Tang sect? Just this medicine? Long Fei asked Bailey Mingxiang.
Yes.
Bailey Mingxiang didn't dare to raise her head. It hasn't healed even after applying it for several days. Which quack prescribed it? Long Fei angrily said again. His entire person was in a state of irritation, and he was easily ignited. Not only Bailey Mingxiang, but even Han Yunqi had never seen His Highness Duke of Qin so agitated before. Han Yunqi obediently lay down and didn't make a sound. Although it hurt, there was a trace of sweetness in her heart. Sigh, she found that she liked this guy more and more when he was angry. Seeing that esteemed Wang Fei didn't make a sound, Bailey Mingxiang could only brace herself and reply, "Reporting to your Highness, this medicine was prescribed by esteemed Wang Fei herself." Han Yunqi buried her head in the quilt and snickered. "Don't you have any other medicine?" Long Fei asked unhappily. Only then did she reply, "This medicine is the best. It's hot and the wound heals slowly. There's no other way." She was clearly the one who moved too much and sweated too much. Okay, Bailey Mingxiang knew the truth, but how could she dare to say anything? Long Fei didn't ask any more questions. His handsome face was tense, and his entire body was exuding an aura of anger that warned strangers not to come near him. However, his movements were as gentle as water. He didn't use a cotton swab, but instead used his fingertips to apply the ointment gently on Han Yunqi's wound. His movements were very, very gentle and delicate, as if he was protecting and caressing her. This kind of comfort couldn't be compared to Bailey Mingxiang's gentle application of the cotton swab. This kind of comfort seeped into her bones and seeped into her heart. Han Yunxi lay sprawled against the cool silk blankets, her entire body relaxing. She could give her entire back to this man now. She really hoped that he'd never stop, that he'd keep caressing her like this. At some point, Bailey Mingxiang had secretly raised her head to look. She saw His Highness Duke of Qin's furrowed brows and lowered eyelids. Then, she saw the gentleness in his hand as he held the sword. Only then did she realize that this man also had times when he felt heartache for a woman. So this was what his heartache looked like. Looking at him made her feel heartache as well. Long Fei Yi had practiced martial arts since he was a child and had dealt with countless assassins. As long as he wasn't poisoned, treating all kinds of wounds was a common occurrence for him. He treated Han Yunxi's 2 ulcers, leaving only the scab that Bailey Mingxiang had just pierced. He looked at it seriously, his brows furrowed. He saw that there was some water on the wound, so it was undoubtedly not a light injury. If he applied medicine in this kind of situation, it would definitely sting, but he had to apply medicine. Long Fei Yi hesitated. Lung glanced at Bailey Mingxiang. Although he didn't say anything, the look in his eyes was enough to break Bailey Mingxiang's heart. She tightly bit her lip and silently knelt down. This servant deserves death for hurting esteemed Wang Fei. Long Fei Yi didn't even look at her, but Han Yunxi turned her head to look. Mingxiang, what are you doing? Get up. Unexpectedly, Long Fei Yi's large hand reached over and turned her head so that she could continue to bury it. He said unhappily, "Don't move." Long. He ordered Bailey Mingxiang, "Withdraw." Bailey Mingxiang silently withdrew. Han Yunxi's head was pressed down by Long Fei Yi's large hand, so she couldn't move at all. Even speaking was difficult. If this guy continued like this, even breathing would be difficult. However, Long Fei Yi quickly released his hand and said indifferently, "It'll hurt. Don't endure it. If it hurts, cry out." Han Yunxi focused on breathing in the fresh air and ignored him. She could still endure pain, as long as it didn't come as suddenly as just now. Bailey Mingxiang had already reached the door and was about to close it. When he heard these words, his heart was filled with emotion. How many men, when coaxing someone, would always say, "It'll hurt. Endure it," or "It'll hurt. Endure it. Don't cry." However, His Highness Duke of Qin had said, "It'll hurt. Don't endure it." Bailey Mingxiang thought, if that's the case, it won't hurt no matter how serious the injury is, right? Chapter 453. Squeak. The door slowly closed. Separated by a single door, Bailey Mingxiang seemed to have walked out of their world and returned to her own. A sense of loneliness washed over her. She felt as if she was the only person left in the world. His Highness Duke of Qin's gentle voice still lingered in her ears. "It'll hurt. Don't hold it in. If it hurts, cry out." When you were sad, in pain and helpless, some men would tell you, "Don't cry, I'm here." This was nothing but comfort. But some men would tell you, "Cry, I'm here." This was reliance. A man with confidence would always have enough patience and tenderness to protect you, letting you make a fuss and cry to your heart's content. A man without confidence would only be irritated when he saw you cry. But she couldn't even see his irritation. In the past, when the poison acted up, when had the pain ever been worse than this burning pain? She didn't even dare to cry. She just smiled and endured. Was this her destiny? Standing there with her back against the door, Bailey Mingxiang could faintly hear the sounds from inside. She wanted to stay a little longer, but in the end, she steeled her heart and strode away. She had promised herself that she would restrain her heart. If she didn't see or listen, would she be able to restrain her heart? Bailey Mingxiang was so nervous and so dejected that she had forgotten about the birthmark on esteemed Wang Fei's spine. No matter how much she struggled in her heart, the people in the room didn't know. This was probably what it meant to think that one's feelings were reciprocated. Inside the room, Long Fei Yi looked at Han Yunxi's wound with his handsome brows furrowed. He hadn't done anything yet. Han Yunxi waited and waited, but she didn't feel any pain. She looked back suspiciously. Your Highness, what's wrong? Lie down, Long Fei ordered. Han Yunqi was really baffled. This guy wasn't the type to dawdle. It was just applying medicine. Why was he dawdling? Actually, Long Fei had already applied the medicine to his fingertips, but he gestured around the wound for a long time. Han Yunqi just couldn't see. She wasn't afraid of pain, but he was the one who was afraid that she would be in pain. He was thinking about how to apply medicine to alleviate her pain. After a while, Han Yunqi couldn't help but secretly look back. She saw Long Fei's silent and serious face. Who said that women looked the best when they were serious? Actually, it was men who looked the best when they were serious. Han Yunqi was dazed by the sight. As she stared and stared, she couldn't help but murmur, Your Highness. Deep in the night, the moon was still. Soft pillows on the high bed were covered by a hibiscus canopy. Her fine black hair was wrapped around her waist. Her jade-like back skin was like rosy clouds. Her doo-doo covered half of her spring glow. Han Yunqi didn't notice that at this moment, her shy and tender body, coupled with this murmur, was very seductive. Long Fei's attention was all on the wound, so he didn't react. He didn't even raise his eyes. His gaze was fixed on the wound, and he repeated, It will hurt a lot. Han Yunqi was infatuated again. She didn't pay attention to what Long Fei said. It was fine that this man cherished his words like gold. In any case, she was satisfied as long as she looked at his face. Long Fei didn't notice her infatuation. He seemed to be making an important decision. After careful consideration, he applied the medicine to the wound. Unexpectedly, Han Yunqi immediately sucked in a breath of cold air. She opened her mouth and curled up. She couldn't see, so how could she know how serious the wound on her back was from Bailey Mingxiang? She originally thought that it would only hurt a little, but she didn't know that it wasn't just a little painful. When the cold medicine was applied, not only did it not feel cold, it felt like there was a fire burning the wound. Long Fei's brows were serious. He hugged Han Yunqi's waist with both hands. Don't move. I'll help you blow. This time, Han Yunqi really didn't move. Not only did she not move, but her entire body also gradually stiffened. Long Fei's warm palms were tightly pressed against her slender waist. There was no obstruction. His rough palms held her delicate skin tightly. When rough met delicate, warm met cold. It was as if lightning had struck the earth. An indescribable feeling of numbness immediately spread throughout Han Yunqi's body. She couldn't help but tremble. Only then did she realize that her clothes were all gone. She was only wearing a doo-doo, and her jade back was completely exposed. That man had seen everything. Heavens, how could this be? Seeing that Han Yunqi had goosebumps, Long Fei thought that she was in unbearable pain. He bent down until his body was almost touching Han Yunqi's jade back. He gently blew at the wound. It'll be fine after a while. It's fine. This scene really made one's ears turn red and her heart beat faster. Fortunately, the little thing had snuck into the Gu residence again. Otherwise, she would definitely be so frightened that she would fall from the roof beam. It was so lively and fragrant that it was not suitable for outsiders. Long Fei's hot breath gently scattered around the wound. It was like an invisible hand that was gently teasing her skin. The candlelight flickered, and the light was dim. Unknowingly, her snow-white skin had become rosy. How could Han Yunqi care about the pain? Her mind was blank. He gently blew at her with endless gentleness, but she almost couldn't take it anymore. Your Highness, don't. Han Yunqi wanted to scream in her heart. However, Long Fei's attention was all on her wound. If Han Yunqi could see it now, she would definitely see the intense heartache in his eyes. He gently blew at her for a while, then asked very seriously, Are you feeling better? Han Yunqi buried her head in the silk blanket and only gave a muffled reply. She couldn't see anything, but she quickly sensed that he had gotten up and moved away from her. She secretly sighed in relief. Very quickly, she sensed that he had let go of her waist. Finally, Han Yunqi's tense body relaxed. But who knew that Long Fei would actually gently stroke her jade back? His gentle fingers wandered around the edge of her wound. It was as if he was caressing her, gentle and delicate. It was as if he was teasing her, but it was neither close nor distant. Actually, it wasn't a caress, nor was it a provocation. It was just a tender affection. His handsome brows were filled with tender affection as he asked faintly, "I've applied the medicine. Do you want me to bandage it?" He often treated his own wounds. Most of the time, he would just apply medicine and bandage it. It was fine as long as it didn't bleed or get infected. He was very casual about it. But facing Han Yunqi's delicate skin, he didn't dare to be casual. Han Yunqi's breathing was a bit disordered as she said in a low voice, "Your Highness, Chen Xie's wound is very complicated to treat. It's better to have Mingxiang come over. She knows." "No need. This prince will learn," Long Feiyi said faintly. "It's very complicated." Han Yunqi was in a difficult position. "How complicated?" Long Feiyi asked patiently. Han Yunqi was distressed. It was indeed very complicated to treat her wound. Actually, the fastest way to heal was to not bandage it. The medicine applied was used to accelerate the formation of a scab. After the medicine was applied, the wound would be exposed and dry naturally, giving the skin a new environment. After lying down like this for 3 to 4 days, the wound would be completely scabbed. Previously, she couldn't lie down, so she asked Bailey Mingxiang to bandage her wound. However, bandaging the wound on her back was more troublesome. Han Yunqi was caught between a rock and a hard place. If she told Long Feiyi that he didn't need to bandage her wound, she was sure that this guy would definitely keep an eye on her for the next few days and make her lie down for a few days. If she asked Long Feiyi to bandage her wound on her back, the bandage would definitely wrap around her body. They were both women. Previously, when she asked Bailey Mingxiang to bandage her wound, Han Yunqi felt very awkward. But now, in the end, Han Yunqi said seriously, "Your Highness, I'll bandage it myself." She was about to get up as she spoke, but Long Feiyi patted her head again. His action seemed very forceful, but it was actually very gentle. He said, "This prince knows how to. Your Highness, if the bandage is too tight, it will hurt the wound. If it's too loose, it won't be able to bandage it. It's better if I do it myself. It'll be easier to control the strength." Han Yunqi hurriedly explained. Long Feiyi still pressed her face back into the silk quilt with one hand and warned unhappily, "Try moving again." Han Yunqi wanted to cry, but no tears came out. She couldn't help but mutter, "Idiot, if I don't move, I won't be able to bandage it." Long Feiyi heard it, but didn't hear what she said clearly. He let go of her. "What did you say?" "Nothing," Han Yunqi replied plaintively. Long Feiyi didn't forget to warn her, "Don't move." Han Yunqi gritted her teeth as if she was going to the execution ground. Her face was filled with anxiety. Long Feiyi cut a square of white gauze diagonally and cut it into a triangular scarf. Then, he gestured at her back and applied some ointment on 2 places on the scarf. Then he said, "Sit up." He was going to use the triangular scarf method to bandage her wound. Needless to say, Long Feiyi wasn't a professional medical staff, but he was quite professional when it came to treating wounds. Han Yunqi's wound was on her back, and it wasn't small. If they were going to bandage it, they could only use the triangular scarf method. If it was in the past, Han Yunqi would have been surprised. But now, she was flustered and nervous. How could she care so much? What could a thin silk doo-doo cover? Her jade back was exposed. She had accepted it, but now, Long Feiyi, are you sure this is okay? Han Yunqi didn't move for a long time. Countless thoughts were running through her mind. However, Long Feiyi was very serious. He prepared the gauze. Seeing that Han Yunqi didn't move, he asked, "Does it still hurt?" Han Yunqi still didn't move. She didn't even dare to look at him. Seeing this, Long Feiyi's heart ached even more. He squatted down and said in a gentle voice, "It still hurts, right?" At this moment, Han Yunqi noticed the heartache in the man's eyes. She quickly shook her head. "Then sit up so that I can bandage your wound." Han Yunqi frowned and looked at him. She really didn't know what to do. In Long Fei's eyes, her awkward expression was nothing but coquettish. It was the first time a woman had dared to act coquettishly in front of him. It was also the first time this woman had acted coquettishly in front of him. Long Fei's lips curled into a smile that even he didn't notice. It was a little helpless and a little doting. He said, "Be good. I'll carry you up." Han Yunqi's heart almost melted when she heard this voice. She clearly didn't move. But why did she suddenly feel that she wasn't so far away from this man? She was suddenly a few steps closer. "Your Highness, are you walking towards me?" In the past 6 months, no matter how close he got, she had never felt this way. This was the first time. Han Yunqi didn't believe it. Just when Long Fei was about to carry her up, she finally regained her senses. In a panic, she hurriedly got up and pulled the silk duvet to protect her body. Her watery eyes were wide open. They were a little frightened, a little embarrassed, and a little reproachful. Didn't Long Fei know that it was already very awkward for her to lie down like this? Was it even more awkward for her to sit up? This guy ignored her. Was he really stupid? Or was he pretending to be stupid? Or perhaps he was just bad. Chapter 454. The burgundy silk doo-doo couldn't hide her exquisite figure, slender and elegant. Although it was just a glimpse, to Long Fei, it was an indescribable visual stimulation. Han Yunqi had already pulled up the duvet to cover her entire body, but his gaze was still on her. Where was he looking at? Han Yunqi gritted her teeth and looked at him in embarrassment. Long Fei was also at a loss as to what to do. He didn't expect that there would be a day when he was so muddle-headed. He had come in for so long and even applied medicine for her, but he didn't realize that her clothes were already taken off. The two of them were silent as they looked at each other. However, very soon, Long Fei's gaze started to wander as it slowly moved down from Han Yunqi's face. Han Yunqi noticed this and furrowed her brows even more. She kept glaring at him, but Long Fei didn't notice. His bewilderment only lasted for a moment before his eyes turned even deeper. It was as if he was sizing up his prey as he stared unabashedly at her. The seed of ambiguity had already been planted in the air. Under that scorching gaze, Han Yunqi's heart thumped wildly as it sped up uncontrollably. Gradually, she didn't dare to look at his eyes and gradually lowered her head. The duvet was cold, but her entire body was burning. With her intelligence, she had always been able to control herself and see through others. However, at this moment, she seemed to have lost control. There was no past, no future. She was at a loss of what to do and did not dare to imagine what would happen in the next moment. However, the man in front of her always had everything under control. She didn't know if Long Fei had seen enough, but he actually calmly took out the gauze and said lightly, "Sit properly." Han Yunqi wanted to say that she could do it herself and ask him to leave, but she didn't know why, but she didn't say it. Sit properly. Compared to earlier, Long Fei seemed to be more serious. Han Yunqi curled up, wrapped in the duvet. She just looked at him and didn't move. The method of wrapping a triangular scarf was to wrap several corners around the front of the body and tie it in front of the body. In other words, the doo-doo was a hindrance. It had to be tied tightly under the doo-doo to ensure that the gauze was securely tied. Was this guy going to bandage her wound, or was he going to bully her? Finally, she opened her mouth and said indifferently, "Your Highness, please step back. I'll do it myself." Long Fei immediately asked, "Why? Why?" How dare he ask her such a question? Although the two of them were husband and wife, they had never done the deed of husband and wife. They had never taken the first step into the lightning pool. The relationship between them was subtle, and they both had a tacit understanding. At the very least, he hadn't reached the point where he could face her so calmly. Han Yunqi took the corner of the scarf and silently tied it herself. Soon, she was done. "Your Highness, Chenchia's clothes are on the right. I'll have to trouble you," she said calmly. Long Fei took the clothes and put them on her. Then, he gently hugged her from behind and rested his chin on her shoulder. Han Yunqi was slightly startled. She finally realized that this man was acting strangely. However, she couldn't pinpoint exactly what was strange about him. "Han Yunqi," he called softly. She responded softly. However, he had nothing to say. He avoided the wound and hugged her for a long time before letting go. Han Yunqi was puzzled. Just as she was about to ask, he had already recovered and asked seriously, "What's with this wound? What's with Su Xiaoyu?" All right, this matter was more important. Han Yunqi shifted her position to make herself more comfortable. She concisely recounted the matter with Su Xiaoyu to Long Fei Yi. The more Long Fei Yi listened, the uglier his expression became. Damn Tangli, he had the gall to hide such a big thing from me. Of course, Long Fei Yi didn't lose his temper on the spot. He told Han Yunqi to lie down properly before heading downstairs. Unlike his good mood when he went upstairs, Long Fei Yi was filled with rage as he descended. Zhao Mama saw him and quickly backed away in fright. At the same time, Chu Shifeng, who'd just found out about Su Xiaoyu, arrived. This subordinate has neglected his duties. May your highness mete out punishment. Chu Shifeng knelt in front of the door. How did you do your job? How could you let a child less than 10 years old sneak in? Long Fei Yi asked. Han Yunqi had already finished dressing and ran downstairs. She stood silently by the stairs. This subordinate deserves to die. Chu Shifeng didn't even dare to raise his head. As soon as he heard that esteemed Wang Fei had been injured by Su Xiaoyu, he knew he was done for. He'd been the one who'd sent people to investigate Su Xiaoyu's origins. Your lordship will give you 5 days. If you can't find the person behind the scenes, do as you see fit. Also, get rid of all the servants and transfer people from the solitary enclosure here. Long Fei Yi said. Zhao Mama panicked at these words and quickly fell to her knees. Your Highness, have mercy. This old servant. Before she could finish, Long Fei Yi lost his temper. Zhao Mama, have you spent all these years in the palace for nothing? You're already so old. How could you be played by a little girl? Zhao Mama trembled and had no words to reply. She really had made a mistake this time. Chu Shifeng, what are you spacing out for? Long Fei Yi asked. Chu Shifeng looked at Zhao Mama's pleading eyes and dearly wanted to help, but he couldn't even protect himself. At this moment, Han Yunqi spoke up. Your Highness, Chunxia has a... But before she could coax him, Long Fei Yi cut her off cold. If we had replaced all the servants back then, you wouldn't have been hurt like this. How could the Duke of Qin's estate allow spies to exist so easily? How could they allow their servants to be bribed? To Long Fei Yi, this was a form of humiliation. With the facts before her eyes, Han Yunqi had no words to refute. She could only plead, Your Highness, just... But before she could finish, Long Fei Yi refused. There's no room for discussion. Zhao Mama and Chu Shifeng watched from the sidelines in despair. If even esteemed Wang Fei couldn't help them, then they were doomed to tragedy. Who knew that a shocking scene would occur? Han Yunqi actually walked forward and tugged at Long Fei Yi's hand. She didn't say a word, but Long Fei Yi looked back and waited for her to speak. What was this? Acting spoiled? A honey trap? Whether it was acting spoiled or a honey trap, there was a chance. Zhao Mama and Chu Shifeng exchanged glances, their eyes filled with hope. Your Highness, when Chunxia uncovered Wang Laifu and Su Xiaoyu, I publicly promised that I wouldn't implicate the innocent. Does your Highness want Chunxia to break her promise to the servants? Han Yunqi said, aggrieved. Now it was Long Fei Yi's turn to be speechless. Han Yunqi seized the chance to give him a way out. Your Highness, please give Chunxia one more chance. Chunxia will definitely tidy up the estate from top to bottom, both inside and out. Han Yunqi's words placed the blame on herself. After all, she was the mistress of the estate and was in charge of all the servants. If Zhao Mama could be tricked by a young girl at her age, then hadn't a smart person like her been tricked as well? As Han Yunqi spoke, she gently swung Long Fei Yi's hand back and forth. It wasn't clear whether it was her words that made Long Fei Yi yield, or her coquettish actions that made him compromise. In any case, Long Fei Yi grabbed her hand and stopped her from moving. Cold, he said, there won't be a next time. Han Yunqi rejoiced and shot looks at Chu Shifeng and Zhao Mama. The two of them were overjoyed and hastily thanked her for her grace. The servants had escaped disaster, but there was no telling what Chu Shifeng would find out. Of course, Tangli was the most pitiful of them all. Long Fei Yi secretly told Chu Shifeng to send word that Tang Li was to continue guarding the hidden pavilion. Without his orders, Tang Li wasn't allowed to take half a step outside or face the consequences. Tang Li was so depressed that he almost went back to the Tang clan to get married and have children. Fortunately, Chu Shifeng coaxed him to stop. Chu Shifeng said, "Young Master Tang, are you sure His Highness will spare you if you go back to get married and have children?" Tang Li fell silent. He didn't need Chu Shifeng to urge him to return to the hidden pavilion on his own. It was almost daybreak, but Long Fei Yi didn't go to see Su Xiaoyu. He and Han Yunqi were brewing tea in the courtyard. As long as Su Xiaoyu was still alive, Long Fei Yi wouldn't have to worry about finding out the truth. He could wait until Chu Shifeng finished his investigation. Long Fei Yi also had something else to tell Han Yunqi. To the readers, Momo's updated her short drama. Add Momo's public WeChat account and reply 5 to see the latest short drama. Public WeChat account, Jamomo 2015. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.